Thank you very much. I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education for Tuesday, April 9th, 2013, and call the roll. Present at the moment is Mrs. Cannelli, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer. Pam Iacona is expected, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Kerry, Mrs. Brand, and of course our student representatives. If I could ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a busy agenda, but we do have a special treat tonight, which is a special reading by one of our students. And I would ask our headmaster from Ward, Jim Coyne, to come up and do the introductions.
It's on.
We're on. Good evening. I'm very proud to introduce you to Delia Montevalli. She is a very accomplished student in our junior class. But way back when she was a ninth grader, she took advantage of a teacher's assignment in our English program called an essay called This I Believe. And she wrote a compelling essay which, for extra credit, was submitted to the National Public Radio, NPR, and just about 3 weeks ago was broadcast on NPR in the This I Believe program, This I Believe segment. So Delia is an exceptional writer, as you'll soon find out, and she debunks the myth that teenagers do not listen to their parents.
Good evening, everybody. I believe in finding a good frog. It seems that all throughout childhood, we are taught to look for happily ever after, and they all lived happily ever after. Isn't that the conclusion to many children's films? When I was a kid, I always thought of that as magical, but now, really, it just seems unrealistic. And it teaches us that what we want is a fairy tale like they have in the storybooks. We all want to be Cinderella who gets swept off her feet by the hot prince. We want to live in a royal castle, right? But I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for us to seek. Now, I'm not saying I believe in being pessimistic, but I do believe in being realistic. It's something I got from my mom. My mother and I always have our best conversations in the rain. We sit in the car, neither of us wanting to brave the rain to get to the house. So we sit, we watch droplets race down the windshield, listen to the rain strike the roof of her little blue Honda, and feel the heater on full blast rushing at our feet, just the way we like it. I don't know why, but sitting in the car, we always talk more than normal. There was one rainy day when my mom told me something that is going to stick with me forever. Earlier that day, she and my dad had been arguing about something, but I can't remember what. So she said, "Don't spend your life looking for Prince Charming. Instead, find yourself a really good frog." At the time, I found this thought really disheartening. Who wants to think that you'll never find Prince Charming and you'll never get to be Cinderella? Another thought that struck my mind, if my mom says there's no Prince Charming, then what's my dad? A frog? I asked her, and she replied with, "Of course. If he were Prince Charming, he wouldn't snore, would be able to cook, and we would never argue. But you know what? He's a damn good frog." Of course, being young, I didn't think of the meaning behind what she was saying. I was too busy thinking of it literally, visualizing my mom as a princess and my dad in frog form. But a few years later, I understand the value of my mom's words. You can't expect everything to be perfect. Let's be completely honest. If you wait your whole life for your prince with flowing hair, statuesque features, and a white horse, you're going to be lonely. I think that the point of finding a good frog is that you accept something that's great, flaws and all. It's so easy to be picky. You can find one tiny thing that's wrong, and that one tiny thing is what you can't get your mind off of. But in life, we can't wait to afford years in vain for perfection. So I think that a good frog, an amazing frog, the best frog you can find is what we're really looking for in this world. Don't laze through life waiting for happily ever after, because I don't think you'll be very happy with the outcome. This I believe.
Thank you very much. Delia, up here. Delia, stay here for a moment, if you will. Mrs. Brand and I, no, stay, you don't have to come all the way up here. Mrs. Brand and I believe, saw you in action also at Stratfield School?
Yeah.
When you were presenting to the students, and you were as effective with students as you have been with adults. So thank you very much for the presentation. Are your parents perchance here?
My mom.
Well, then please stand up. And a round of applause for her. So I express the appreciation of all board members for your presentation and making our school district proud. At the risk of having you listen to all 8 board members praise you, is there any other board member that wishes to make a comment at the moment? Mr. Liu.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Do you think you could send us a copy?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Of course, it'll have a copyright stamp on it, right? Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, an equally exciting presentation on the draft teacher and administrator evaluation plans.
Very smooth. It's
So I'll turn it over to Dr. Title.
back to business. And actually, I should point out that we've been working, I've been working with the town officials to recognize some of the accomplishments of our students. And the town body seem to be most interested in recognizing the sports teams. So we had the hockey team at the Board of Finance meeting. We have our ski team and I think a couple of wrestlers at the next RTM meeting. And I believe at a Board of Selectmen meeting, we're going to have the cheerleaders from Ludlow. So I think we'll do some academics here for the board. A couple months ago, you heard a presentation from Esther Bobowick from CES about the required components of the new teacher and administrator evaluation plan. And information about the requirements of that plan and what our and the board's responsibilities are has been shifting over time. About a week after we had that meeting, the state sent us a note that said, oh, by the way, your board has to approve this. Which we had just heard from Esther was not the case of her understanding at that time. We were working on it anyways, and we were planning to come back and give you a presentation on what's happened, and Ann Lefferts here to do that. The further clarification now is that the board has to approve transmitting it to the state as a draft. The state actually gets the final word on this plan, and the implementation is also a part of it. So it's not on for action tonight. It would be on for action at the next meeting, but there's been a tremendous amount of work in a relatively short period of time that's gone into this. Ann Leffert is the new Director of Human Resources. She replaced Margaret Mary Fitzgerald, very large shoes to fill there, and has really taken the lead on this project with a lot of other people. So I'm going to let her walk you through the highlights here and then answer any questions you might have about it or what our next steps might be. So Ann, welcome.
Thank you. I don't know that this is going to be as entertaining as that poetry was that we just heard, but I will do my best. I do want to thank the committee members, and I did put in your packet, one of the first items in the packet was a list of the committee members, and I'm not going to list their names, but they've done some very hard work over the past number of months, and I was very proud to have worked with that committee during this time period. We began in September. Karen Parks, Meg Boyce, and myself joined a consortium at CES. Esther Bobowick was one of the representatives from the state RESCs. That was the liaison between the school districts and the state of Connecticut, because new information was coming out really almost on a weekly basis throughout the course of the school year on the teacher evaluation and administrator evaluation plans. So we began our work up at CES gathering information. Tonight, I'm not going to go through the whole underlying rubric of these plans because I believe Esther did that with you. I'd like to really focus on what our process was, where we landed, some key differences between our plan and the state plan that the state is running right now in pilot districts, and then answer any questions that you might have about what you have before you. So our committee began working in December, and one of the first pieces that we did was to take a look at the requirements, and there are quite a number of requirements that need to be in this plan, very specifically as developed through the state statute in June of 2012. We looked at a rubric that the state provided to us, which was an approval rubric, and on that rubric there were really what I call 21 decision points, 21 areas where we had to be sure we included information in our plan. As part of our decision-making during that first meeting, we presented one of the biggest decisions we had to make was what observation rubric were we going to use? What were administrators going to use and teachers going to use to really define effective teaching practice, know what it looks like? Administrators know what it looks like when they see it in the classroom. Teachers have a deep enough description so they know how to improve their practice. So we researched 4 different models that first day, presented some information to the committee. Charlotte Danielson's model, which is the state of Connecticut's SEED plan, uses a combination of Charlotte Danielson's model and the Connecticut Common Core of Teaching. We looked at the Connecticut Common Core of Teaching, we looked at Kim Marshall's model, and we looked at Dr. Marzano's model. We gave the committee some homework to take those 4 models home, to take a look at them, read through them, and at our next meeting we were going to make a decision, discuss the rubrics, understand the pros and cons of each of them, and then hopefully come to a decision. We had a multi-hour meeting that next meeting and had some very rich discussion over all of the models, and ultimately decided to go with the Marzano model. Dr. Marzano is well known in education circles for his work on looking at effectiveness in teaching. He's written many books on the topic. Many school districts use his work to define effective teaching practice. So we felt very confident that this model would improve our practice here beyond what the other models could do. Marzano's model is a richer model, includes examples of what these behaviors look like in a classroom, not just a quick line of a description. So we also understood that the Marzano model had done a crosswalk with the CCT. One of the requirements of the new evaluation model is that it has to be aligned with the Connecticut Common Core of Teaching. And Dr. Marzano had already done the work of identifying where there's cross connections between those two. The other piece that we agreed to as a committee was to take a look at the Connecticut guidelines for the number of observations to be done for each teacher, and also to take a look at what the Connecticut SEED model, the pilot model, included for those number of observations. As Esther told you several months ago, the Connecticut SEED model has twice as many observations for teachers as is required by Connecticut guidelines. So we elected to follow the Connecticut guidelines, and that's what you'll see in the document for the recommendation of the number of evaluations, or I'm sorry, observations to be done for each teacher. The next meeting, what we had done is taken those 21 decision points where we had to be sure our document aligned with the requirements on the guidelines, and so we broke that down into what I call those 21 decision points, where we had to make sure we aligned there. At that point, we divided our committee into 3 subcommittees, and each subcommittee took a number of those. We broke these decision points down into what were reasonable groupings, and the committees worked separately for a little while, did some work outside of committee work, did their homework, lots of reading, lots of research, lots of trying to understand the depth of what we were looking at, and then we reconvened once the subcommittee work was done at a rather lengthy meeting, I'll say, a number of hours to really take a look at what were we going to put together in our plan. And then our last meeting, we went page by page, line by line, looking at what we had put together through our subcommittees, what we had put together in our plan based on the subcommittee work, and ultimately reached a unanimous decision that the plan that's before you, the teacher evaluation plan, was a plan that every single committee member could approve. You'll notice on the list of members of this committee, we have the Fairfield Education Association president, we have the Fairfield School Administrators Association president, we had members of both bargaining units and members of central office. So we had quite a wide spectrum of folks there, in addition to some classroom and student support services folks. So we used the seed document. One of the questions you might have is how did you put this together? We had a template from the seed document, and there was a fair amount of information in that seed document that was good information that we felt we could use in our plan, and worked off of that scaffold to revise that to come up with what you see again in front of you today. So that was our process for the teacher evaluation plan. It sounds short and sweet. It wasn't. It was a lot of work, many hours, lots of very rich conversation to reach agreement on what this plan looks like in front of you. Now, I can go on and explain the administrator evaluation or take any questions you have on teacher
What's the board's
evaluation.
pleasure? Do you want to do questions on the teacher and then have her present on administrators? Questions on teacher. So take questions on teacher. Who would like to ask the first question? Mrs. Brand.
First, my compliments, because quite frankly, that's a huge undertaking. One question is, I know the various plans came at a cost, which again is something that districts have had to incur. What was the cost of Marzano's?
For Marzano's plan, the only cost that we're going to incur is the cost for professional development to train our administrators and some of our teachers. We're really looking at training our administrators on the model this summer. We've set aside dates with Learning Sciences, which is the group that is implementing this for us, and we had identified money in the budget for the 13-14 school year to cover those expenses, so we feel we'll be okay with that.
Is that about 3 days? Is that what I read?
We're looking at 3 days in the summer. We're going to see if we can do 1 day this spring, looking for 3 days in the summer, and then some intermittent work as well. But the big piece of the professional learning for this plan is for administrators to get calibrated to what they're looking for in classrooms, and that's a part of the requirement, that we have to do that calibration work, and the Marzano group will do that with us during the summer. And then we also have the opportunity to train some teacher mentors who won't be evaluating using this rubric, but will be taught the rubric to exist as resources in the building when teachers are writing their goals, looking at, you'll hear the terms SLOs and IAGDs, and to help teachers do that. So we're hoping to train some folks a day or two this summer as well on the teacher level to help their colleagues in the building.
My other question is, you're talking about training the trainers and the administrators so that they can then evaluate. Have we started the rollout with our teachers and how they're going to appreciate how this is going to work as well?
We have not at this point. Remember that this plan, once it leaves this board, you may approve it. It still has to be approved by the State Department of Education. They have to ensure that it meets the rubric. They're ensuring us that there's a quick turnaround time. After May 7th, we'll get that up to them immediately electronically, and we should hear back from them by the 2nd or 3rd week of May whether we need any revision to our plan. We were hesitant to roll out too much in the event that they change something in the plan, that we then have to go back and reverse what we've said.
One of the things that I had the benefit, because I got to watch it, and then I got to have Esther Bobwick do another presentation again at the last SES meeting. But what she pointed out, and I think that is very valuable, since we are going to be switching to Common Core kind of testing, anytime that you switch to any kind of testing, there generally is a dip in scores. Further, because the way it was explained to me that the evaluation process works, and since it is weighed very heavily with student outcomes, that a lot of teachers that may have been considered exemplary with this new grid, and perhaps also in conjunction with some of the test score results, they may now find themselves in proficient. And it isn't that they are any different or not doing as well. It is the combination, it is the timing, but it is also the two things, independent and also together, that will cause that result. So that's part of when I'm talking about the rollout. I don't want people to suddenly think what happened, when in fact it is more by circumstance that would happen. It has no reflection actually on how they're doing.
Right. A couple things I'll comment on. Number one, We're trying to get the message out to teachers that proficient is a great place to be.
Right.
So that's one piece, and I think it's hard if someone has had a checklist that's always been on the, you know, the one side of the checklist, and now all of a sudden sees proficient. We don't want teachers to take that as meaning that they're not effective teachers. Proficient is a great place to be. So that's one message that we want to get out to teachers. The second is there's a great deal of conversation around the state about just what you're talking about, that testing, and how are teachers going to set targets if the testing is changing. So we fully expect that this plan is going to be constantly reviewed over the next year or two as different implementations come out with the SBAC assessments, what's happening to CAPT and CMT next year. So there's a lot of question marks, and the state fully understands that there will probably be some changes to what we have to do for teacher evaluation.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns was certainly the staff and how they would respond, but also the public. I don't want public to see someone who they thought was, quote, exemplary suddenly seems proficient, and that seems to them mediocre. It is not
Yeah,
the case.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
Right, thank you.
I think Dr. Tyler
I do want
wants
to point out that teacher evaluations are not made public.
But they won't be personal, but aren't we reporting the whole grid to the state?
We have to
And that is-
record in the aggregate to the state, but they won't be individually identifiable.
No, they're not personal, but I mean, it's
Right.
like test scores, we'll get results.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to get on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a
Good
quick
point,
comment. Ann said, once we approve it, reminder of Dr. Title's comment, at the moment, the state is saying, we simply want you to approve submittal of the draft. And the form that is in here as 1H in your thing is authorizing the chairman of the board to sign that form that says we're transmitting the draft, and we're waiting for state reply. Other questions that board members have? Mr. Fatterbean and then Mr. Convertito.
My question relates to, I guess, page 6 of the document. On that page, there's the, I guess, breakup of the different evaluation system where you have teacher practice-related indicators and student outcome-related indicators. And the teacher practice-related indicators are broken out into the observation of teacher performance and practice, 40%, and parent feedback, 10%. It's my understanding that parent feedback is school-based and not individual teacher-based necessarily.
There was a choice there. We elected to go school-based. We feel that it's important to note that a parent survey is not about customer satisfaction. It's about what is the school doing as a whole. We elected, and you'll see this in the document, we elected to take the results of the school climate survey, and as teams are developing, schools are just developing their plans around what they're doing regarding school climate. We felt it was important for teachers to use that work going forward next year. We're afraid there's going to be survey fatigue as we go on if we're continually surveying over and over and over again. So we have some good information based on the school climate survey. We're actually thinking we might hopscotch years, but that's not something we have to get that fine-grained in the plan at this point in time. So we are anticipating a survey.
There was also a decision what percentage to make that parent feedback in the composite of the teacher practice-related indicators. Is that true?
The 10% is something that we elected to have in there. It is 10%. The other choice was peer feedback as to 10%, and we did not choose peer feedback, nor did the state model, as a matter of fact. So the 10% is
But
10%.
you could have used parent feedback at a lesser than a 10%.
We had to have a 10% parent feedback or peer feedback, and we chose parent feedback. That 50% had to be 40% of the teacher observation and then 10% of which of those two we chose.
Two shows, all right.
Yeah.
I guess my other question relates to page 27. And this relates to the use of a standardized assessment in the student learning objectives. And it seems on the bottom of the page it indicates that in the years that when the, I guess, in the years in which the students do not take a standardized assessment, there be the student learning objectives would be based on non-standardized indicators.
In the grades where there's a standardized state test, we have to use 22.5%. Half of that 45% has to be based on the state test. So right now, it's grades 3, 4, 5,
Right.
6, 7, 8, and 10. In grades where we don't have that state assessment, so I'll pick grade 1, it can be too non-standardized, although we've indicated in here that we do have standardized assessments at the grade 1. We can use some of the reading assessments that we've used, the math assessments, and so on. So a teacher could choose that plus another non-standardized indicator, and you'll see a chart of the chart that's listed on page 28 of the document is specific to Fairfield. These are assessments that our committee put together to help teachers decide what they can use as standardized assessment for 22.5% and what they can use for non-standardized.
But some of these standardized assessments in this chart are ones in which could be given at different times. They're not all, they're all, in other words, some of these standardized assessments are not given at predetermined times of the year, are they? They
Well,
can
I'll
be
give
given at
an-
any time you select.
Well, I'll give an example. The DRA2, our teachers administer that to our youngsters in grades, the lower grades, 3 times a year. So they might, they would do their assessments in the early part of the year before they do their objectives, typically during the month of September. They're going to set a target for where they want the bulk of their students to be by the time they reassess those students in May. And that's going to be one of their 22.5%. That would be one of their targets.
Right, but that is I guess, a choice one makes when to give that assessment. It doesn't have to be, it could be done every year or different years at different times than the CMT, so to speak, or other types of standardized assessments.
For the other assessments, grade level teams can decide. Typically, what we're trying to do here is not make this be something totally new. We're aligning this with what our school teams are doing now on their school improvement plans. So our administrative teams are working on looking at what are some targets for their school, their whole school, that teachers can pick from. So we see many of the teachers picking SLOs and IAGDs related to their school improvement plan.
I guess what I'm getting at is my concern is that in some years you may not have, for example, the CMT or an equivalent, because that's given on a district-wide level. But you may still have the option to give standardized assessments every year. But in this program, a teacher, for example, does not have a district-wide standardized assessment, may not have any standardized assessment. So that year, they're being, their student growth or their student learning objectives are based on non-standardized indicators.
Correct.
So I guess my concern was maybe I would think that there could be some other form of standardized assessment given in that year, which they can be, which would be part of their standard learning objectives, even though it's not a district-wide standardized assessment. But
Right, in the academic areas, you're going to see a pretty good alignment with what teachers can choose for standardized assessment. Where you find the areas that are gray are student support areas. A guidance counselor, a dean, a speech and language pathologist, a social worker, what are they going to use for standardized assessments? So those areas would mostly lean towards a non-standardized assessment because there is nothing that they're going to do yearly for students in a standardized area.
No, I understand that. I guess my concern, the whole concept of this plan is to sort of align it with standardized assessment and get some objective identification of student improvement.
Where it's available, yes.
So the concern was that when you could give a standardized assessment in a year, because you have a selection of standardized assessments to give, and it's at your discretion to give it in that year, in other words, it may not be, and it may not be a standardized assessment given in that year, so how do you have an objective teacher evaluation?
Can I clarify and say that in the years where there is not a statewide or district-wide standardized test, the principal and the teacher will work out which of these that we already use in one way or another would be the standardized test that year, or is there a possibility
Well,
you would
remember
just
that
skip a year?
The state tests are given every year. So we're looking at the CMT scores are coming in every year. They can set targets every year. Any goals that a teacher sets in all of these 4 areas that this plan encompasses are agreed upon between the administrator and the evaluatee, the teacher.
I think
So-
Mrs. Brand wants to either follow up on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I think you're also speaking about the calibration. Is it going to be consistent through the district? There is the motivation to certainly have an assessment by mid-year, and it should be consistent. for the very reason that a teacher and the administrator are going to have to, again, take a second look and make sure they're on target. If what they had thought they could accomplish in September was, realistic, maybe things changed in the classroom, school. And the other thing is, in terms of what needs to happen, the difference with the Common Core is that so many of those steps are spelled out so clearly. They don't have a lot of latitude in what the kids have to master. So if you look at the course of that year and you back in, you pretty much know how you're going to have to pace it to be able to have them meet those requirements at the end of that classroom. So you have some standardized pieces already, but I think if you were concerned about what things they would look at to have to meet in requirements, that's actually dictated with the Common Core.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Fattabine.
No, I'll leave it at that.
You'll leave it at that? Okay. Mr. Convertito, I think you are up next.
Let's stay with page 28. I assume enclosure 1D, when you talk about student growth and development, again, that 45% indicators of academic growth and development, this is the list of indicators that we're using?
This is what we put together to help our teachers understand what we use in the district for standardized and what might represent non-standardized. It's not meant to be all-inclusive. There could, are other assessments out there that a teacher and administrator might agree upon as well.
Shouldn't those be included in here if this is something we're going to improve?
The assessments, we've included the assessments that we feel are available now to teachers. That could change over time. We see this document as something that will have a committee review every single year. So if there are new assessments that are being given at a regular time, then we can add those to the list as well.
Okay. On any one of these list of 20 or so that you have here, my fear is that you're going to have a Sherman School leaning towards one and a Bird leaning towards another. How do you get consistency in the numbers with so many different variables and so many different types of testing?
Remember, what we talked about is this is really aligned to school improvement plans. We don't anticipate that all 11 elementary schools or all 3 middle schools or both the high schools are necessarily going to be targeting the same thing each year on their school improvement plan. So right now, teachers set goals related to what is on the school improvement plan for an area of improvement. So we wouldn't expect that there's going to be 11 fully aligned buildings doing the same thing, that all teachers at a certain level are going to be writing goals on the same piece.
Let me jump in on this a second. I think there's a difference between having consistency in what we as a district use for assessment tools versus what the individual teacher's goal for that year may be based on. So for example, in math, we give a blue ribbon assessment 3 times a year in certain grades. That's not likely to change. I mean, the current model, all 11 elementary schools give that blue ribbon assessment 3 times a year. Now, depending on what the individual teacher goals, what the individual school goals are, what the needs are, teachers may or may not use that blue ribbon as part of their individual evaluation, but it wouldn't affect whether blue ribbon is given or not given in the classroom. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
But what my concern is that if you have a school improvement plan in one school, okay, that, reading is an issue on, okay, but you don't have that over in another school, or you just have an administrator who really likes one type of testing over another. I mean, are we boxing people into a certain type of assessment that may or may not be real?
No, there's a consistency in the testing across the district.
Okay.
That's the Plum book
Okay.
that Anna and the principals and the curriculum leaders use.
Okay.
Now, depending on the results of those assessments, individual schools will develop improvement plans targeted to specific areas that may need to be improved in that school. Every school improvement plan that I've seen at the elementary level has goals related to mathematics and goals related to reading.
Right.
We don't see them where, well, we're not going to work on math this year. Sorry, that's totally not allowable. So this is really getting right down to the individual level or a particular grade level. So you might have a grade level that says, our kids have been traditionally weak in these 2 or 3 areas. This is what we're really going to focus our efforts on this year, and here's the measures we're going to use for it. Doesn't mean they get to not give the district-wide assessments.
I guess what I'm not conveying clearly is, this is a teacher evaluation, not a school evaluation.
That's correct.
Okay. you may have a school improvement plan that says, this is an emphasis this year or an area of emphasis, okay? If you have a teacher who's doing well in that area, is there a way to better evaluate them on the other areas? Okay, I mean, I don't want the school improvement plan to dictate the teacher evaluation plan.
Well, there's
At least I see them as two very different things.
Right. We're trying to leverage all of these improvement efforts in the same direction so that people don't see school improvement over here, data teams over here,
Right.
Common Core over here, teacher evaluation over here. I mean, and this is work, and every district is dealing with this. So this is a work in progress. The idea is to create alignment and get power from that so that people are all moving in the same direction and they see them as connected. Now, those connections are not clear right now in everybody's head, okay, including a lot of ours.
Okay.
But we are absorbing a major amount of school reform all at once here and trying to make sense of it as a school system. And it's a tremendous amount of work, and it will take years to really absorb this into the bloodstream. So there are really two different things going on here, but we're trying to link them. And one of the reasons in the phase-in plan, we're concentrating on the classroom teachers is in the first year, if you notice that in the implementation plan, is that those are the ones that we have the best assessments to use right now. The really tricky ones that Ann talked about, those were the state's allowing us to say, you can push those off to 14, 15. So that's part of the thinking that went into the development of it.
Okay. So let me just follow up with those qualifiers or
Yep.
IAGDs that you use. You mentioned that you cut them down from the Connecticut seed model. What did you cut out?
In this particular area, we did not. The SLOs and IAGDs are a required part of any plan in Connecticut. So the wording in here is very similar. There's some tweaking to fit Fairfield, for example, our list of assessments, but we did not change anything here. The piece that we reduced was in the observation area, the 40% of observations. Rather than requiring 6 observations of every teacher in the building, as the Connecticut seed plan requires, we have it as 3 observations. More formal observations for newer teachers and teachers who are struggling, 1 formal and 2 informal for teachers who are exemplary or proficient. So we reduced it from 6 to 3.
Okay.
We're following the state guidelines, not the seed plan.
Okay. If you can give me one more luxury here. Parent feedback. If it's to be a teacher evaluation plan, why would you do parent feedback for the entire school rather than parent feedback for those students?
For, you mean,
Those students
by
of
class,
by
say?
class,
Yeah.
right.
The recommendation was not to do it by class.
Whose recommendation?
The state's. What happens when you're doing it by class, they've set a target for if you don't get a large enough sample back, it's not valid, and anything less than 15 responses in a classroom would not be valid. You take a look at, once we get into student support folks, a special ed teacher might have 15 students and get 5 surveys back. The survey, again, is not to reflect on an individual teacher's practice, but on the whole school climate piece. Do I feel welcome in my school? Do I understand how I can engage further in my child's schooling? Those kinds of questions are what you'll see on the surveys. That's why we chose to use the school climate survey results this first time out, because school climate teams are just starting their work, and we feel it's a great place for teachers to really focus for that first year and then administer a survey again next year.
By doing that, don't you sort of negate that 10% because everybody's going to get the same rating on that 10%?
Again, the rating is not based on the survey. If you take a look at the document, the rating is on what will happen in each building is the building collectively will identify at the beginning of the school year 2 or 3 areas based on information they have. In our case, we're recommending that they use the school climate survey. 2 or 3 areas that the school wants to focus upon. Each teacher will choose one of those 3, 2 or 3, and will develop some kind of action to be assessed by the end of the school year. So, for example, if the school is having difficulty or their score is an area where they want to improve in the area of communication with parents, a teacher might decide that's the one I want to work on, and the way I'm going to improve my communication with families is I'm going to do a newsletter every month. The way they would achieve a goal on that particular piece and proficiency would be that they can demonstrate those 12 newsletters and can bring those to the evaluator at the end of year conference. So there's an action piece that they'll be doing to be evaluated upon.
What you just said doesn't say parent feedback. To bring back the 12 to the administrative evaluator would be in a different section of that spectrum.
The feedback was on the school climate survey, I'm making this up, that some parents, the lower score might have been achieved by that building in the area of parent communication. Parents indicated that, I wish I had more contact, I wish I knew more information about my students, my child's program. So the school focuses on that as one of their 3 areas, and teachers can choose how they might improve communication with families.
Okay.
And then a survey is administered again, and then
So here's your scenario. You got 3 areas in your, and I'm playing devil's advocate with you here, okay? You have 3 areas on your climate survey that says need improvement. 1/3 of your teachers take this area, 1/3 take this area, and 1/3 take this area. Aren't you diluting the results, okay, of what any individual teacher is doing, okay, by taking it as a school-wide assessment?
again, that assessment is based on what the teacher does to improve that area that the school has chosen to focus upon. So it's not that it's their way to improve communication with families. So they've chosen a survey. They're going to keep a log of phone calls. I'm just making this up. They're going to keep a log of phone calls, and they're going to promise that, or make a goal that I'm going to reach out to 2 families per week and make phone calls for good things that have happened during the week. They can choose an action to target. So it's not based on improving survey results. It's something that their action will improve that particular area that the school was focusing upon.
But again, this being an individual teacher evaluation, okay, doesn't, I don't want to get bogged down in this, but it just seems to me that by doing it as a parent feedback for the entire school climate, that you're getting, I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah. I'll only make one comment, and then Mrs. Connelly. It is not uncommon in my work world where you set a target for the institution, and then you look and say, what is each person's role in meeting that target? And I think, Ann, that's kind of what you're talking about.
But that's what the school climate survey is for.
Yeah.
Are we meeting that target? I don't know why that's playing a role in a teacher evaluation. I think it's diluting.
I think it is fair to say that 90% of this plan is what the state sent us?
Correct. As far as the parent survey,
Mrs.
are
Connelly.
taking their direction.
To follow up on Mr. Convertito's point, I think what he's saying is that, so the school climate survey is a done deal. It's already been taken. So that the action taken on that, we're not then getting additional feedback to know that we met the goal. It's simply, here is a, what's the word for it? A document, that proves that I achieved my goal at the end of the artifact. Okay, so I have the artifact to prove it. It is not then getting subsequent parent feedback on how have we improved based on that initial benchmark of the school climate survey.
Let me clear that up. There will be another survey. Every year there'll be a survey. And then
Okay.
every year there'll be new targets defined. So we're using the school climate survey because we have those results now and teachers can get started. We'll need to do another survey next spring, the spring of 2014, to then guide the practice for teachers for the 14-15 school year. So there will be surveys every year. We
Okay.
didn't want to do a survey in the fall and then a survey in the spring. I told you we're worried about survey fatigue, that we're not going to get good responses. Does that help clear that up?
That helps clear up that point. I would agree that I'm on the same page with Mr. Convertito in terms of, I look at this as wanting to improve teacher. I mean, there's the idea of, are we complying with the state, and the act of compliance is exhausting enough, but if we're embracing the idea of the teacher evaluation plan of making teachers better, I guess I would have looked for a different opportunity for individual teacher feedback. And I say that as a teacher and as a union member, and well recognizing what a union position would be on that, and recognizing you're going to have the strong teachers holding up weaker teachers. And I'm just not in favor of that notion. I recognize maybe that's a little bit too much to bite off at this point. And I
that's
recognize the
clearly
point.
not the design of a parent survey. It is not to evaluate individual teachers, for parents to evaluate individual teachers.
Not on certain categories, but there are certainly, There are things on which parents can give valid feedback. We obviously involved parents in a whole curriculum process. If we believe we can involve them in a curriculum process, I certainly think they could be involved more in a teacher feedback process. So
Right. We
I
feel they're
don't
very
agree with that.
engaged in this process through the use of surveys, and we also feel that teachers being able to take individual actions for how they, as one teacher in a building of 100 teachers, can improve that practice in whatever area they've chosen, we feel is very powerful, that every teacher will have ownership towards what they can do to improve that area.
Mrs. Kennelly, do you have another point?
I
Because
have
Mr.
other
Carey-
points, yes.
Well, can I interrupt just for a moment? Mr. Carey, I think, wanted to follow up on the point that you were making. Will you let him
Sure.
do that? Okay.
Thank you.
Carey.
Thank you. So just to beat this horse to death, and make sure I understand, we have a survey, it has results, it finds deficiencies. As a result of those deficiencies, the teacher's going to do something, and they're going to report back that they did it. But if I understand Mr. Convertito's, Ms. Kennelly's point, is we're really not going to materially determine if that made a change or not in the aggregate as part of their evaluation for the year. What's going to happen is they said they did something, they did it. We have 12, to your example, newsletters that were completely non-effective and not read by the parents, and there wasn't a perception that there was an improvement in communication. That wouldn't necessarily matter, is what I'm hearing. And I want to paint that as a glass half full, but it sounds to me like we're retroactive here in terms of how we're...
Yeah, it's hard to judge, how you're going to get effective feedback on this, but the surveys are given every year so that each year the school can prioritize 2 or 3 areas that would be work that the whole school can put their effort behind.
Back to Mrs. Kennelly.
Okay. One point to Dr. Title is, are all of these documents available on the website?
The draft?
The drafts?
I didn't think they were, but I
don't
wasn't
believe
sure if
they
it
are
had been
at
done.
this point.
Yeah.
Is that something that that can be done?
This enclosure, the documents, they are in draft form at this
Right.
point in time.
Right.
But since we're voting at the next meeting and therefore an opportunity for comment, I would think it would need,
Sure.
I don't think you should print this whole thing off and have it in the
Sure,
back
we
of the
can put it on
room,
the
but.
website. Yeah.
Yeah, we.
There's a, state has, as part of helping us bear the cost of this, the state is developing and is contracting for a standardized parent survey that they are basically expecting us to use as we roll this thing out. There's a copy of it in here. So they're basically not expecting us to develop our own survey and use it. They're going to give us the survey, and we may have to pay to get it scored and tallied and so forth. But that's how it's designed. It's to give it on an annual basis. It's just in the very first year, we have some data we can work from to develop our goals, and then this is likely to be the survey that will be done in the spring, the one that's in your booklet that starts on page 42. The state is developing a parent survey that we are giving and that everyone is basically expected to give across the state. And that's pretty much where it came from.
Okay.
And that's how the state's designed it, and this was, believe me, when this whole plan was being developed at the state level, and you had a lot of constituents in the room, and they were hashing out what percent for this and what percent for that, the specificity around parent surveys were very much part of it, and this is basically what came out of it. So there is a feedback loop on this. There's a survey, action, another survey, and it's 10% of the total score.
I'm not sure how much breath is left in this horse, but you, Mrs. Kennelly, had the floor and I think had other issues she wanted to ask
Good
about.
at CPR, so I'll just take it from there. One more question to Dr. Title. I've been hearing rumors that the state is already falling behind schedule on this. Have you heard anything about that?
In terms of the pilots?
No, in terms of the state plan, the district plans.
Well, the district plans are supposedly due into the state April 15th, and then they're supposed to review them and get them back and so forth. So we don't even know who's submitted on this. It's been a rough road for the state on this pilot. I mean, you heard from Esther that this has not been smooth, and it's why the state decided to give us some flexibility in terms of implementing, because there's going to be these bumps in the road, particularly in the first year. It's going to be enormously time-consuming. But they have an evaluation, as you know, of this pilot going on under the statute by the NEAG School of Education, University of Connecticut. There have been next to no results of those shared with anybody yet. So that's, so I would agree with your assessment that they're behind in the sense of getting feedback to districts about what the results have been from the pilot so we can, do things the right way.
As of
But
Friday-
they've not come back to say, well, sorry, you don't have to implement it.
Right. As of Friday, Esther shared with us, we were up at CES on Friday, that I believe she said there were no plans submitted at that point yet.
Okay. Couple more questions. Ms. Leverett, you were using the title that for the teachers who are exemplary and proficient, they would only have, they would have fewer, but no teachers are labeled at this point.
Correct.
So how could it be that in our first year, we're going to have some teachers who have fewer evaluations than others?
Our committee has to work on that. We will probably take a look at, we know that we have non-tenured teachers, and those teachers are the folks that we've always traditionally given more attention to, and our committee will be working later on this spring to determine what that looks like for teachers going forward. All teachers will have the same number of observations. They're going to look different. We've defined formal and informal observations in the plan. Teachers who are at that proficient and exemplary level, more experienced teachers, will have that one formal 30-minute pre-conference, post-conference, written feedback, all of that, and then 2 other informal, which could be observing a teacher in a data team, observing a teacher mentor a new teacher, looking at teachers' lesson plans, those kinds of things. Those are the informal. Could be a walkthrough.
Except, again, you're using the language that more experience equates to exemplary and proficient.
Not at this point. I have told you that this spring we're going to be taking a look at exactly how we want to roll this out. We are following the guideline from the state regulations of the number of evaluations. We've taken that exactly from the state regulations. For us, it's going to be, what is our practice going to look like? Starting next year, the first year. We know, I mean, we've talked with Esther and folks at the state, the first year is going to be wonky. Yeah. We have tests changing. We have teachers that perhaps will be setting targets on tests that won't be given any longer. The state knows that there's some work that has to be done on that.
And
Wonky, do you want to define wonky? Is that a technical HR term?
Yeah, it's a technical term.
I was with you. My last question is, and I apologize, I completely missed the page in here where it indicated with whom was it being implemented for 2013, 2014?
Yeah, I didn't get there yet.
Oh, but
Right.
Dr. Title referenced
there,
it.
right.
It's one of the last pages in your document. It's
Done the administrator plan yet,
no, we
guys.
haven't. Well, that one I'm
Hey,
hoping
this is
gonna-
important.
No, I know. It's 1G.
Well, it's one of the last individual pages.
Before
like
we move
this.
on, if I may, because it's on the
Mrs.
top of
Kennelly, I
yours.
think Mrs. Brand has a comment on your last comment. Is that what you're saying?
There were 2 things. I think we were talking about teacher evaluations and then that 10%, that parental part, and what the school identifies as their goals. I don't think the teacher part and the school goals with the parent survey, what they're emphasizing, are going to be mutually exclusive, because if a school adopts it, then all the teachers will have it as part of their plan as well, so there will be an administrator looking to see what they did. And I don't believe, they were talking about, for instance, using homework as, and please correct me, homework is a good example of that. If a school started to talk about homework as a communication piece and focused on how they were communicating with parents about homework, what the feedback then was that. So it was my understanding that the survey also could be modified only in that if they were emphasizing particular pieces.
Well, I think we want to be careful that we're covering all bases, and the other piece is that our surveys that we have to use have to be valid and reliable, so we can't just create a survey out of thin air and think, well, we think that's measuring what we think it's measuring, and it's
Right.
not. So we have to be careful with that, too. So that's why there's a recommendation from the state survey that's been given in multiple districts, actually across the country, the company that developed it, Panorama, so we're looking at validity and reliability on those.
Back to Mrs. Kennelly for Part B of her last question.
This is just a point to Dr. Title. As you look at the numbers, the idea of all classroom teachers, grades K through 12, and the idea that that's well over the required 1/3, just a suggestion, I think a group that would deserve to be pulled out of that would be anyone who's implementing a new curriculum. That just as a thought of pulling that down, because that's truly something that there's going to be intensive professional development needed for. I'm thinking, for example, specifically of the math, that to have on top of that the weight of this professional development, my personal opinion, I would be very comfortable with them being, for the first year, pulled out of those numbers.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who has not spoken yet, that if anybody wants to speak? If not, I'll go back to Mr. Convertito and then Mr. Carey.
Just one quick question, and it has to do with building and how you're going to implement this. You have 11 elementary schools that have one administrator in them, and you have multiple administrators from that level up. What is the support system going to be at the elementary school level to get this implemented? Are we pulling people out of central office, or I just can't imagine that one elementary school teacher can get through this plan.
What we looked at, I looked at the numbers of looking at multiple administrators at the middle school and high school, and as you said, the one building administrator at the elementary school. The numbers are remarkably similar of the number of teachers that each evaluator will have to evaluate. At the elementary level, there's one administrator. It's looking to be an average of about 35 or so teachers to evaluate. And once we get to the middle school and high school, you might see it drops down to about 31 or 32 per administrator. But we're seeing it's pretty even across the levels.
It's going to be incredibly
It's not gonna be
challenging
easy.
to roll this out. I mean, it's come up multiple times in the budget. I mean, it's going to be very difficult. In the first year, the relief is that it may just be approximately half of that number in that first year, depending on what it is. And of course, we're going to be providing. My guess is most of our professional development through the year is going to be around carrying this out. There's no question this is a huge lift for the school system, and I think as we go through it in the first year, it's almost in some ways it's like our pilot. We'll see where the real difficulties are. And I think it's one of these things where you can really do something like this well, and you can do it fairly well, and you can do it sort of in a perfunctory way and still comply with the law. And I really don't want to do this as a perfunctory way, but that could end up what happens in the first year. People just trying to get through the requirements. And then I think as we look at next year's, the 14-15 staffing, then we're going to get a chance to see, okay, do we need to bring more, man and woman power to the table of this, and in what form, and how can we make it work? But this is going to be a critical area for all of us for next year, no question.
Thank you. Mr. Carey?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Dr. Tittle for the clarification in terms of the state survey process. And I don't want my summary of the conversation before to be viewed as being critical of our team. I understand it's my criticism is typically more to one-size-fits-all state programs that we have to get into the box. But one thing, and I, by the way, based on how this rolls out, I completely understand why you'd go with the survey and you utilize what's been created. My question is, in terms of that 10% in the future, seeing that we're doing the instructional rounds program, and that is part of our teacher development process, would there be thought of moving towards peer review in the future, or would that create a problem for you in terms of how you try to do instructional rounds and trying to keep that as a I guess?
We, for just that reason, felt we needed to stay away from peer review. We're trying to engage teachers in the process of really reflecting on their practice and allowing peers to come in and give good feedback, critical feedback to what they do in a classroom without being judgmental. So.
Okay, so then that's where I was going. So you chose not to do that because of the non-judgmental part of the instructional rounds.
Absolutely.
To really get people to openly work with each
Exactly.
other and help them improve their practices.
This is
So
about improvement,
we're
not
left
about
with this
gotcha.
other choice, and that's it.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder if I could ask the board if we can move on to the administrator plan, which has many of the similar issues, but
Not really.
that, well, I'm really using that as a phrase to try and ask the board to move along.
No, I mean, not really. I don't believe it has the same issues. When we moved on to working on the administrator plan, we had started work on the teacher plan first. In speaking with the administrators that were on our teacher evaluation plan, it was agreed that we wanted to keep those same administrators looking at our administrator plan. You really have to know about the teacher plan to be able to understand what the administrator plan was. And so we spent time reviewing it. The administrators were already familiar with the teacher evaluation plan, took time to review the administrator plan, and our administrators had presentations on that by our team already earlier this year. And after careful review and discussion, the administrator plan plan is very closely aligned to the state guidelines. There really is not much wiggle room as far as what you can do in the administrator plan like what we did in the teacher plan. And ultimately, our committee elected to adopt the Connecticut SEED plan for administrators. So that's our choice going forward. This is not something that we have to submit to the state. We'll send it with our document, just that it shows that it is for Fairfield and that we've adopted the Connecticut SEED plan. But there's, again, very few places to make choices here, and we felt that this was something that was put together, aligns with the teacher plan, and we can go forward with this plan. That's my presentation on the evaluation plan for administrators.
Questions from the board on the administrative plan? Mr. Convertito.
Don't ask me about the math in the back. It's really complicated. The math group can help us out later on.
What I find, and maybe, again, the administrator plan, again, is, to me, a top-down evaluation plan. I don't see a lot of input from teachers up, unless I'm missing it somewhere in the plan.
There is a survey in here, a constituent survey, similar to the parent survey for the teachers. There's a constituent survey for administrators.
Not a lot of...
10%.
Right.
Yes.
Having been a business major in college and studied, the Chevy Vega and the Toyotas and everything else, best management practices over the years have changed, but there's usually a lot of input from the people on the ground up towards administrators. I find this plan somewhat lacking in that, okay? I think that give and take and that establishment of trust between, I mean, when you have one administrator evaluating 35 people or 40 people, I personally would like to see more input from the people on the ground side as the effectiveness of their administrator, rather than an administrator above an administrator evaluating somebody.
We don't have that choice.
There is no wiggle room in that
There's
at all.
no, it's 40%, 10%, 5%, 45%. That is the requirement through the state plan.
And that
the
10%
guidelines.
has to be done via survey?
It could be done through different focus groups. They talk about focus groups. We've chosen to take a look at a survey, but there are options there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions on the administrator survey? If none, that is E, and I assume F. Did you want to go through 1G and 1H as well?
Yes, G was our committee's recommendation for an alternative plan. The state's default is that the whole plan will be implemented for all teachers, all administrators. They gave two options. We didn't feel we liked either of the two options the state gave, and they did give us the option to put another plan together, and this is the plan that we chose. All classroom teachers grades K to 12. We're required to have at least 1/3 of teachers participating. And then we exempted the following student support specialists, and the reason being there's a lot of gray area around, especially the 45% student growth area for these folks. The state is working on information about that. They're looking to have some ad hoc committees working on that and make some recommendations, but that's nowhere near ready yet, and we felt that we wanted these folks to be a part of hearing about the plan. They're going to be part of faculty meetings and learn all about it, but they will implement in the year 14-15. So we anticipate probably about 60 to 70% of our teachers will be part of this plan.
Questions on the alternative implementation plan that is allowed by the state? Mrs. Brand.
In reference to some of the special categories that we have, I know that Seth said that they have part of that peak group that they're going to be working and produce a document in May for school psychologists, and at other risks are taking on similar kinds of practices to do the same.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard the same thing. I know that Mike Regan's doing some work out of CES on just that work. I believe he's leading the school psychology work, yeah.
Other questions on document 1G? If not, 1H is just the transmittal form, and I'm not exactly sure how the motion will be worded, but at the next meeting, it would be allowing the superintendent and the chair of the board to transmit the draft plan. Any other final questions on the teacher and/or administrator evaluation plan. Going once.
Quick question. If it's due April 15th and we're not voting on it till,
The state recognized that when they changed the rules of the game, that they'll give some dispensation to when
Right.
these things arrive.
Right.
They are aware that May 7th is our target date.
Okay. Thank you
very
very much, Ann. A lot of good work. We now have approval of the minutes, which is enclosure number 2, the minutes of Tuesday, March 12, 2013, and the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March 12, 2013. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Gerber, seconded as Mrs. Brand. Questions, comments? Mrs. Kennelly.
page 3, Elise Archibald teaches where? Okay. Because I know Mrs. Lacey is here, and she's the Stratfield teacher last I checked, so.
So that should say North Stratfield. That's what you're saying, yeah. That's not an effort of the Stratfield School to kind of recruit a teacher, yeah. Any other comments on the minutes? If not, all in favor of the minutes as amended from that, with that one word, raise your hand and say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Fedevine, are you unanimous? The minutes are approved as presented. Student reports. Now, the next most exciting things that we do, and I have normally kind of gone in order, but that means that Ward hasn't started first, so let me start with Ward first tonight.
Okay. Good evening, Board. Thank you. My name is Danielle Clark, and I'm here with Casey Longley. So a lot has been going on at Ward. Spring sports season has officially started, and I'm going to start with girls varsity lacrosse finally beating Ludlow. Since 2009, the score was 12-8. Extremely exciting. We're really proud of all of our players. Kevin Robinson, who was in the hockey game, he qualified for All-State. Boys track lost to Ludlow by 10, but girls won. So proud of them. Our 4x8 Team 4 outdoor track has also qualified for All-State. And Nick Gans and Aiden Fiol, 2 of our varsity cross-country and track runners, qualified for all FCX and all state, so we're extremely proud of them. Boys lacrosse beat Trumbull last week, and girls track won against Central, Bassick, Harding, and Ludlow. Kate Allen is now all-state, and Caroline Keogh is all FCX for track. As for academics, Caroline Keogh again scored a perfect score and received received a perfect score on both her AP Math and Science exam. And she also won the Siemens Award. Infinite Campus launched, which is okay. It's different from Edline, but we're liking it. Kind of.
I think you have a role to play in diplomacy.
Yeah, thank you. Our marking period 3 closes, which means that report cards are coming up after break. Let's see. AP testing starts May 6th, and our college fair is tomorrow. As for awards, Sophia Bermonte and Isaiah Mazur are finalists for the Connecticut Science Fair and received high honors for that. And Caroline Keogh, oh no, I already said that. Sorry. That's pretty much it. And let's see. We have Ward Day this Friday, which is so exciting. Everyone's looking forward to that. We have the Academic Bowl, which is where students and teachers kind of compete in competing with history and political science, stuff like that, and they'll compete. But it's a day filled with activities. Teachers come in and do you can sign up for dance classes and golf. Italian club gives out the food. So that's this Friday before break. And our junior prom is coming up as well as senior prom. So, everyone's asking and it's cute. It's cute. The Earth Day celebration on April 27th is coming up, and volunteers are needed, so people are starting to sign up for that. And our debate team, Bailey Kenny and Henry Minot, just qualified for states, 3-0, so we're proud of them.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. For the clubs at Ward, our student forum has been running our school store since about just after midterm started, and it's still really successful, and we're making a good amount of money. And what we're hoping to do is take some of the pictures that have been taken for the yearbook and put them around a school to help us give a more welcoming vibe. And also, the Key Club has just elected their new officials for next year, and they're about to start a new fundraiser that's called Wags for Hearts, so that should be around Ward soon. And then our music department, we just had 4 of our students participate in the All Eastern Music Festival at Hartford this weekend. And earlier last week, we had a lot, I think it was 30+ students in the All State Music Festival. The music department is just about ready to go on our Virginia Beach trip, leaving on the 25th to compete against about 20 other schools for awards. And the spring musical was like 3 weeks ago and it went really successful. Everyone loved it. I was in it and I had a really good time, so it was really fun.
Thank you. Any questions for our representatives from Ward, Fairfield Ward? No questions. Shall we go on to Ludlow?
Great. Good evening, Board of Education and other guests. I'm Marco Congello, and this is Alice Rocha, and we're privileged to speak on behalf of Fairfield Ludlow High School. Tonight, Alice will start.
All right, so first off, CAP testing was successfully completed, so we're really glad to be back on our normal schedules. The sophomores are awaiting their results, and very anxiously. And then the UConn's Connecticut Writing Project recognized 8 FLHS students from 9th and 10th grades. Next off, on May 3rd and 4th, FLHS Drama Club will be putting on the musical for Oliver for families and everyone else who wants to attend. We love going out to our play and supporting our fellow drama club students. And then also the YAC, the Youth American Cancer Society, is raising money and awareness for lymphoma and leukemia through the initiative called Pennies for Patients. So very excited about that. Marco?
All right. For the 10th year in a row, FLHS community came together 2 weeks ago to participate in the Battle of the Houses. And this is an event in which the 3 houses at Ludlow, Wright, Warner, and Webster compete in a series of challenges, from relay races to human bowling to all sorts of fun stuff. This year I helped organize the event as the first vice president of the Student Representative Council, and I'm very proud to report that it was a tremendous success. The entire school came together and shared in friendly competition and spirit. And this year, actually, Wright House took the prize for the first time since 2006, 7 years ago. So we were very proud of the Wright House. On the sports end of things, Ludlow took 4 state championships home this past season. 3 of these we share with Ward because they are co-op sports. First, we'd like to recognize those. We shared the championships with Ward for the boys ski team, the girls ski team, and the boys hockey team. We were very proud of them. Additionally, FLHS cheerleaders took home the state championship this year and placed 4th at regionals. Everyone's very proud of our athletes. In other news, our Spanish department's yearly trip to Spain is leaving this Thursday, and I'm actually taking part in this trip this year, and I'm very excited. This is a program in which, similar to an exchange program, where 13 of our students go over and stay with 13 of their students who are taking English, and we're taking Spanish here, Spanish language, and we stay with them for a few nights, and then after we come back, about a week later, they come and stay with us, so we're also very excited. Additionally, similar with Ward, both junior and senior proms are coming near, and many of the gentlemen have asked their dates in very creative ways. And on a more personal note, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have special permission to ask Alice Rocha to our senior prom. 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . . . . . 。 . . 。 . . . 。 . . . 。 . . . . . 。 . . 。 . . . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 .
There's a pause here while we're waiting for the official answer. The answer is yes. Congratulations. Now, Marco, you just asked on live TV, and all of your friends are now saying, so now what are we going to do to top Marco?
I don't think it could be tough.
And there will be an event later on in your life, and I expect that it'll be at home plate at your favorite team, I presume. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Enjoy the prom. Any questions for our Ludlow representatives?
Yeah, if you guys, could you just give us what the dates of the junior and senior proms are?
I know that junior prom is May 18th for all schools. As for senior prom, considering I'm not a senior, I'm not sure, but I know it's early June. First weekend of June.
We'll send them out.
We can get those to you.
Yeah, we'll send them out to everybody.
Any other questions for our Ludlow representatives? If not, thank you very much. As usual, you're welcome to stay. Oh, geez.
Look at this.
Gifts just keep coming. Okay. So now,
Doreen, you get to follow that.
now,
And on a high note.
now, I think, so thank you very much. You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to take off and whatnot. If any of you have your PDA with you and want to quickly tell us what the score of the game is. Huh? So now, Ann, I think you won, because now Doreen has to follow Marco's request.
Right.
The next item, what?
Now we get that.
Yeah. So we do have board committee liaison reports. Excuse me for a moment. Is there any board or committee liaison report that needs to be given at the moment? Mrs. Connelly.
Just very briefly, that we're working now on an attendance policy, and for the policy committee, but it's we're continuing to work on it in the next meeting, so we're hoping to have something new to bring forward to the May meeting.
Thank you. Any other that needs to be made? Go ahead, a question.
It's actually for Mr. Liu relative to Fairfield Woods, because they're still trying to address how they're going to close that out because of the issues with the lighting in the auditorium. Do we have any sense of what direction this is going in?
Actually, I think they are working on it. I know that the minutes, I had to leave early that night because my wife was caught in traffic and I had to pick up a baseballer. But I saw the minutes that they are looking at different means. I actually, on the way out, I spoke with the drama teacher, and he said they were looking at different means. But from the minutes, and from what I understand, is they can't close out their committee until they've passed it on to the Board of Education. Is that correct? Right. So I'll keep you updated on that.
Go ahead.
It's 5 to 5.
Okay.
It's
5 to 5 is the score of the game.
5 to 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
scoreboard in the back.
Thank you very much.
All right.
If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the superintendent's report,
Right.
in which is enclosure number 3, review of the quarterly financial update through March 31st. And I think Doreen is going to address any questions.
Oh, she has a,
Opening it up to questions.
No, you might be making comments as well, but
I have never had such a tough act to follow.
it's the first in my career. Been coming to board meetings for 25 years.
That's a good catch for Frog.
Right. Oh. I can get together.
I'm happy to be giving this report 3/4 of the way through the school year, fiscal year. I finally seeing a light at the tunnel. It has seemed like a long school year. It seemed like it was never going to end.
She's not even a student.
Still haven't gotten there yet, but it is there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We will be within budget. We have some challenges this year with the school year being so late. in June. The kinds of things that I like to have tied up with, you know, hourly payroll, substitute costs, that kind of stuff, typically happens at least at least a week before the end of the year. Sometimes two, and you get a chance to estimate those costs and tie them up. And we just won't have that this year because we're going right up till last day of school's Thursday, last day of the fiscal year is the next day. So it's going to be a challenge. We've had, as I summarized, we started with Osborne Hill cost. That's been moved over to the town with the additional appropriation. Hurricane Sandy, 25% of those costs are included here. The other 75% has been moved over to the town for FEMA. Fairfield Ludlow High School roof is also covered by the town either through insurance or deductible. With the Sandy Hook incident, we have many security projects underway. And then, of course, there was the blizzard. So that, I think that and that blizzard, by the way, cost us almost $200,000. So it has been a challenging year. We do have under personnel savings due to additional retirees and turnover. This is really something unusual. Overtime for custodial and maintenance personnel is about on target. If you remember, we added, a significant increase to the budget this year to bump it up to where it's, a more realistic number, where we've been spending here historically, and it seems to be on target. Benefits, health insurance has gone to the medical retention. Social Security will have some savings because of the savings in salaries. Pupil personnel, I'm also happy to say, is on target, and although it looks like it's over budget right now, the final payment of excess costs will come in. We've already received $2 million, but the state will finalize that payment in May based on the March filing from Pupil Services. The schools are working on finalizing their purchase orders for the month of April. Under support, where we have district support accounts, program implementation, security, which is where those projects will be charged, legal fees, postage, that kind of thing is on an as-needed basis. Maintenance and transportation. Transportation will be over budget because of additional special ed transportation. Utilities will probably have some savings there, but we've only paid or been invoiced for about half of February, so there's still some unknowns there. And also with the late school year, the electricity, we use more electricity when school's in session, and that's all been delayed. Under capital, we have started the K-8 wireless project that was put on hold earlier in the year because of Osborne Hill, and that has the potential to be over budget based on what the bid prices came in at. So that's my summary.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Brandt, you had a chance to submit some questions in advance. I thank you because that helped Mrs. Marcel. But do you have any other things that you want to follow up on?
Yes, please. First of all, thank you. I sent you 10 questions, and there was a lot because it did help me a lot. There were a couple of things. One, I still would like to see, I had agreed that we would have a quarterly report for Aon. I know we are actually in the budget part, but it also helps, as we sign out going forward. I understand and appreciate that the pension side is from the town, but the Board of Finance gets a report, and since that also is a very big driver for us, I think it would be a good practice for us, and I think that was one of the other pieces. So it doesn't mean that you have to generate it, but whatever the Board of Finance gets, if we put a formal request in, I'm sure they'll be happy to also share those documents with us, and I think that would be helpful so that we can anticipate costs moving forward. And the last thing I had a question about is, because we're going so close to the end of the year, and do we have any contractual issues? Because in one of your answers you mentioned substitutes in the last week because you're not sure, quite frankly, how many people are actually going to be in the buildings and who have vacation plans. do we have any conflicts with contracts or obligations, or?
I think Ann's been working on this directly with the staff, so she's probably best to answer it.
Okay, thank you.
We've been checking with staff members who might have had vacation plans prior to the November decision to go to the last week of June. We're really holding those folks harmless. They did not know they shouldn't be planning. So right now I have about 20 staff members, which is really a small number. I don't know if we're done yet. About 20 staff members have submitted documentation to me that they had their vacations planned prior to November 27th. And those people, they've committed money, plane tickets, rental fees, all those kinds of things. Beyond that, I don't know who might be out. The other piece is that we have some of our folks who have longer than 187-day contracts, so 192 days, 194 days, 196 days. Those people are submitting plans to us of when they're going to work the extra days that they still have to work to fulfill all those days. And we've given them options of April break or the first 2 weeks of July, and they're giving us a document that's attesting with their principal's signature which days they'll be working to fulfill their obligations to those days.
For the teacher contract, then it is, I guess it's not clear to me, is it mandated or not, or are we hitting beyond because we already I just don't understand.
We can, for those people who work days after the school year, our teachers are fine. They're getting their 187 days in by June 27th. For guidance counselors, deans, instructional improvement teachers, 10.5-month secretaries, we have people who have those extra days.
Right.
The reason we sent out documentation for them to sign and send back to us is that they do have to be paid by June 30th, and we're asking them to enter into an agreement with us that these are the days that I'm saying I'm going to work to fulfill my work days. So they're not being given a pass on reduced days.
Okay, including the teachers that if they've made plans, they're going to have to submit something else?
Correct.
or-
They have to submit documentation that they made those plans prior to November. If they made those plans after the board made the decision for the June week to be an extra week of school if needed, those people will not be paid for those days if they elect to
Thank
not
you.
be at school. Okay.
Any other board member have any questions on the quarterly financial report? Mr. Carey?
In terms of the excess cost payment, can you just remind the board what we budgeted at for this year in terms of what our expectation was?
2.6, 2.5,
The percentage the
2.6
state would pay is actually what I was looking for. 80, was it 85?
75. 75.
And are we on target for that, or is that still yet to
Yep.
be determined? So about 75 is what we think we're going to get?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll dispense with the quarterly review of the financial update and move on to approval of the elementary math curriculum grades PK to 2. And the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the elementary math curriculum grades PK to 2. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber? And Mrs. Iacona. So Dr. Title will start with some comments, and then we'll have questions. This is a voting item, so then, of course, we will go to the public as well.
Thank you. So after the last meeting where the board had a lengthy discussion on this topic, there were some requests for additional information that Walter and Anna provided to you, and I thought the best way to kick off the discussion would be them to walk through these documents, explain sort of the highlights, and try to sort of reset where we are with this process, and then at that point, just sort of open it up to board discussion and action on the item.
Does any board member need a blue folder? We have. So we're going to start out on the left side of the folder. I'm going to walk you through each of the documents and just identify some highlights to structure the answers to the questions, really, that were provided by the board to Walter and myself. So I'm going to start off with the first handout, which is a list of the assessments administered to preschool in grades 2. It's entitled District-Wide Mathematics Benchmark Assessments. And the world-famous, I think, Plum Book, that's already been referenced this evening, is an affectionate name, actually, for the Fairfield Public Schools assessment calendar and benchmark assessments. And that has been in place for almost 5 years, where we identify for each grade level common assessments that are administered by subject area, along with benchmarks, meaning what levels we expect students to perform at in each grade by assessment. You will see an abbreviated form of that before you that identifies for preschool through second grade what the assessments are for mathematics. You will note that there are assessments that give us information about basic facts, hence the Fluency test, are also in kindergarten and in first grade. You'll see those that are referred to as oral counting, number identification, quantity discrimination, missing number. Those are basic fact type of assessments. And then we have something like the end of unit assessment in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that's more conceptually and application and problem solving based, along with the problem solving and computation test that's given in second grade. I note that preschool assessments are new this year. It's the first time we're giving 3- and 4-year-olds little assessments, but it's critically important that we understand where their number sense and basic fact identification of numbers, the cardinality, how many, those types of understandings, and where they are with that. So that's a new assessment for our preschoolers this year, but we will be continuing in the future. Next handout I'd like to bring your attention to is the Student Achievement handout, CMT scores, as asked by a board member to understand the history of our math scores. You have reading and writing there as well, by grade 3, 4, and 5, and this represents those students who are at or above goal, hence the goal and advanced levels. That is a 6-year summary of student achievement on CMT by elementary school with a district and state average. And then the last page of this handout on the back is an understanding of the exiting 5th grade fluency results between 2006 and 2009 and 2010 and 2012. This very simply is how many addition, subtraction, multiplication, division facts does a child know within a minute. It is a nationally normed assessment, so we understand on average how many problems a child should be solving, and you will note some growth in those areas over the last few years.
Okay, and next, there was a question about, this is pre-K through grade 2 that we're bringing forward, and how does this fit into the big picture? We brought 3, 4, and 5 forward last year that was adopted, approved by this board, and soon will be coming forth in middle school. So just to put this all into context, if you take a look at this colored sheet that has the domains, and these are very broad stroke areas that are focused on by grade level. If you notice, it starts off with kindergarten in counting and cardinality. If you notice, counting and cardinality stops after kindergarten. That is because there's an expectation of mastery at the end of that grade level, and we have systems in place should students still be working on that in grade 1, but that's the standard that we expect of all kindergarten students. And you'll notice it progresses number and operation in base 10 is very strong in all the grades through grade 5, and it makes a shift when we get into grade 6. Operations with fractions, you'll see that doesn't begin until grade 3. It doesn't mean that children aren't exposed to some fraction concept, but really there's not a standard or an end-of-year expectation for those children until we get into grade 3. The algebraic reasoning, algebraic thinking, again in all the grades in the elementary school. Note geometry is kindergarten right through high school. That is common. Of course, it develops and becomes more sophisticated as you go through the grade levels. And then obviously the last one is measurement and data. What I've done to kind of bring this to light, and this was again a question about more information about the curriculum documents that came before you. So I thought I would just sort of walk you through a basic number strand, and it from pre-kindergarten as to what that might look like right up through, actually through grade 6. So if you flip over the sheet that's on the back side, if you notice, we're looking at, in pre-kindergarten, it is counting and cardinality that we begin there. The Common Core standards don't go into pre-kindergarten, but we have written a pre-kindergarten document. I'm trying to point out that on the color form, there is no pre-K. It just starts at kindergarten. That's because this is Common Core. But we do have counting and cardinality in our pre-kindergarten and in our grade 1. If you'll notice, it's composing and decomposing numbers on a very basic level and understanding what is number and how it represents quantity. Then in kindergarten, it becomes a little bit more sophisticated as we start looking at a group of 10 and thinking of it as a unit and some extra ones. And so we're starting to build some foundational understanding of what is place value. As you move into grade 1, we really start looking at what is place value, the number of tens, the number that is in the tens place. That digit represents the quantity of tens that you have and some extra ones. And by the time we get to grade 2, we're really looking for students to have an understanding of what is place value, being able to even operate with place value concepts. I want to make a distinction. If you look at understand place value and then compare that to grade 3 on the reverse side of that sheet, notice the language shifts. Grade 3, use place value understanding and properties of operation to perform multi-digit arithmetic. So that's how it becomes more sophisticated than that grade level. Grade 4, they're generalizing place value with whole numbers. Then as we move into grade 5, we start looking at our number system and extending our understanding of the patterns in our number system as to the powers of 10 and how that continues the magnitude of number, not just with whole numbers, but as we start looking at decimal numbers and what does that mean in relation to one another. And then finally, as we get into grade 6, we apply and extend the previous understandings of number to the rational number system. So that's just sort of a continuum of how these progress through the grade levels. So although grades 3, 4, and 5 came forward last year, we're bringing grades pre-K through 2 right now. There is a map that we are following for consistency, and this map continues on into the middle school. So we're ensuring that we have some coherence and continuity as we go through the grades.
There's a question that was given to us about the mathematics budget for the elementary school. So there is a document in your folder about that. For PK5 for the 13-14 school year, we budgeted $80,000 for text materials. That was a placeholder in the event that we had found a text that we felt was appropriate for our students. We did not make that recommendation to the board, as you recall. Hence, those monies will be redistributed to the curriculum instruction work, which I'll talk about in just a second. Under program implementation, that is really made up of 2 categories: 1, professional development, and 2, curriculum and instruction development. We've allocated $25,400 for the 13-14 school year to focus on a trainer of trainers model to really enhance the pedagogy, the development of pedagogy in the area of how to teach mathematics. But equally as important, as we have talked to some board members in the last couple of weeks, is to build the capacity of teachers' mathematic knowledge, period. What they know about math, as well as how to teach math. We have found in a lot of the research in a lot of the towns we've talked to, particularly with the Common Core, there is a focus on developing the math knowledge for teachers. I think sometimes you often hear teachers say, oh, I'm not really good at that math, or adults, period, right? Not just teachers. Well, it's really critical, particularly with the higher standards in the Common Core, that teachers feel confident in their own knowledge about mathematics. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to a research article, which is in this folder as well. And then in the area of curriculum instruction, because we will be moving forward with developing our own pre-K2 units of study for the following year, we're going to utilize some of those monies from the 80,000 column, if you will, and move it into this area and really focus on, clearly there was a plan to update our progress reports because the progress reports in K2 are based on the old curriculum. We'll have to revise that. Also develop some implementation guides, such as we have in other grades and other subject areas. We talked at our last meeting that we really have a deficiency in the area of parent communication in math. And we're going to spend some time this summer developing a solid parent guide. that will be an assistance to parents to help their children at home and to better understand what's happening in the math classroom. We also talked at the last meeting that we need to beef up the homework a bit. We need to get back in there and take a look at the quality of our homework, the extent that it addresses basic facts, but as well also problem solving, and make some better alignment with the past skills and connection to future skills. And we also need to revisit our assessments in K2 so that they will be aligned with our units of study. So that is the plan as of right now, based on the decisions we've made in the last couple months on how to expend those funds. Clearly, we'll take a better look at that as we walk into the budget process in May and June. If I could bring your attention now to the right side of the folder. We'll spend just a little bit of time on the research, because I know that's been a point of conversation with many of the board members and Walter and myself. And you have six articles in the research. So I'm going to give you a really short, like one schmidget on each research piece. The first article is on the mathematical proficiencies. And these are articles that became very informative to the development of the curriculum as well as development of our instructional model. Mathematical proficiency article really underscores the importance of focusing on 5 key pieces all throughout mathematics instruction. Conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, strategic competence, adaptive reasoning, and productive disposition. That it is critical in the development of a curriculum and instructional model that you intertwine all 5 of those. And there's actually a visual on that front page to show how intertwined they are. The second article that you have is entitled, What is Important in Early Childhood Education? And really, this article is focused on pre-K, K, and first grade. And it underscores the importance to introduce math concepts, methods, and language through a range of experiences and strategies. And we really took that to heart in to inform the instructional model that we have in place now, but also how it will inform the units of study that we'll be developing over the summer for rollout in September. The third article that you have before us is becoming a foundational article, district-wide, at many levels, and that is, what is the definition of rigor? I think you've heard our superintendent speak about our focus on instructional rounds and data teams and problems of practice, and rigor has been at the heart, particularly at the elementary level, on what is rigor and what does it look like in the classroom. And we felt like this article really talked about what does rigor look like and what is rigor not. And it really kind of strikes us in between the eyes, because sometimes we have this old-fashioned definition of rigor, which is on the right side of this article, and we're really trying to move our mathematics instruction, our teaching and learning, to a more rigorous level as defined by the left side of this column, this chart. The fourth article that's before you that was informative to the development of our curriculum, but back to our professional development, is the Big Ideas article. And it's really important to underscore in this article that this article helps us to understand that math teachers need to know about mathematics along with the pedagogy of mathematics. So they need to know the math so they can facilitate high-level classroom instruction. That's the bottom line of this article. The teachers need to know math, and they need to know how to teach math. Hence our emphasis in the future for K2 and our current emphasis for 3-5 on really developing the instructional strategies that teachers will employ in the classroom to facilitate that high-level learning for students. The fifth article that's before you is entitled The K-8 Publishers Criteria for the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics. And this article has helped us determine key criteria when we are choosing teacher support materials as we build our units. We have many materials. We are quite resource-rich in our district, particularly in the area of mathematics when it comes to teacher resources and areas that we could pull from for our units of study. And Mr. Wakeman will underscore some of those as he walks you through the unit in a moment. But this article gave us some questions to ask ourselves as we're looking for materials, questions to reflect on, to consider what's the highest quality material when we are looking to build our units. And finally, the last article that is in your packet is the mama bear of them all, and that's the Common Core on mathematics. This drives what was in our curriculum, but also caused us to ask the question, is there something more and above and beyond this that we can do for Fairfield students? And we did point some of that out to you last time and in some of our conversations with some board members in individual meetings. So that's a summary of the 6 articles that's before you. Walter's going to walk you through the sample of a couple of units of study that we have from 4th grade, because we don't have any developed, obviously, in pre-K 2.
Thank you. The purpose of this was to, again, address a few of the questions that were asked, in particular around some of the resources that we currently use, as well as understanding differentiation. And so what I'd like to share with you is this is, if you take a look at the unit, behind the unit cover, there are actual standards from the documents that were adopted last year that are right in the front of this unit. So all of the units will have the standards, so the teachers are very much aware of what they're teaching to and the expectations for the unit. If you look on the reverse side, you'll see the mathematical practice standards and what they look like for that particular grade level. So those are also what students need to know and to be able to do. The page that follows that has a snapshot of a week. And it's essentially the construct within a unit of how it is developed from the beginning to the end. And it focuses on the big ideas. And if you'll note, even in the teaching point, the understanding that angles are additive is a big idea that's developed through the course of the week and revisited. And then that is followed by a sample of an actual lesson that the teacher has before them that they can use. These are used in part for not only developing content understanding, but also the pedagogy that's involved. You're looking at the overall structure of a lesson within this particular lesson. There are different components, and I'm not going to go into all the details right now, but they talk about what is the teacher focusing on as far as their objective, and what are the students focusing on as far as their work. What are their focus questions? Followed behind that are some samples of the what the students will engage in the classroom. And you'll note the complementary and supplementary angles are not in the Common Core. However, these are some of the language pieces that are some of the language that's introduced during the course of the work. And children have opportunities to go through this. The point of this particular lesson is focusing on the idea that angles are additive. The children are introduced earlier in this unit through very concrete and physical manipulations of understanding what angles are. By the time they get to this point, we're really looking at, can they understand numerically or more abstractly the relationship of angles? If you take a look at sheet number 2, now we're looking at supplementary angles. And then I'd like to bring your attention to sheet 3. If you look at that first problem, that is directly out of a sample item that is brought, that is related to the Common Core standards. It is also the standard that is in our current document in grade 4, and that is understanding, for example, number 1, with 180 degrees, if you know 2 of the angles, can you figure out the third? That is the standard we expect children to know and to be able to do. You'll note that if you look at the rest of that sheet, it goes above and beyond that. I just want to bring your attention to the reverse side, where we start looking at alternate exterior angles, as well as different combinations. And so it is not so much limiting children to that expectation, but really kind of deepening their understanding as they're moving through this unit. So I just wanted to, this idea that angles are additive. As a means of differentiation, it is also suggested in that particular lesson there is a differentiation note that does not prohibit children from using protractors and or using other models to support children's understanding and visualizations of what does it mean when angles are additive. So again, there is differentiation in both areas around the standard for this particular lesson. If you move into the next lesson, that's lesson 12, you'll note that this is much more investigative, but the intent of this lesson is not so much the investigation as it is practicing measuring angles with protractors. So the students will have opportunities to continue to practice. And even though we may be talking about, and here it's called an approaching ray, but we're really looking at incident angle and reflected angle. Again, the terminology is not a grade 4 expectation, but the idea that children have an opportunity, multiple opportunities to work with measuring angles and have practice with that and share their findings with each other. There are a few variations on this suggested for the classroom teacher as a means of differentiation, as well as classroom management, so there are some options for teachers. And then finally, as we get into lesson 15, I included this one in particular because we're referencing the resources that we have specifically in the building already. So if you would take a look behind that lesson 15, you'll see a sample of it's TCSM, TSCM, Teaching Student-Centered Mathematics, is one of the resources that the teachers have, and that is from which this lesson came, and it is a sample of the page from there. And same with the Black Line Master, that comes from the same resource, so that lesson is built on that resource. And then if you go to the final page, that is an actual example of our Scott Forsman textbook. And in this particular lesson, it is relegated or used as a homework assignment related to the lesson. So again, that's how the resources are being used and being built upon. As Anna had suggested, we have many resources currently in our buildings that we can utilize for this purpose.
We're all set for questions about the curriculum.
Okay. Questions from the board? How many of you took the test that was in there with all the angles? Questions from the board. Mr. Convertito.
Yeah, can you run down that, the budgetary and how you would like to reallocate those funds?
You got that answer?
Yes. I'm sorry, repeat the question, please? The time frame for...
No, there was
The,
$80,000 in the budget for textbooks. You mentioned that you wanted to reallocate those to what?
Right. Because of the text and materials, there are some materials that are cited to support some of the work, but the majority of that will go toward the writing of the units for grades K through 2.
We do need to do some additional work on the exact details of that. As we're moving forward without a text, we really need to go back to the drawing board and identify how many weeks we have left in the summer, first of all, to get some work done, and how many man-hours will that require, and are there supplemental teaching materials that we will need to acquire to accompany any of the lessons. So I did commit to the superintendent that before we get into the cutting season of the budget, that we'll have some more specifics to that answer.
But is the expectation that most of that 80,000 will be used somewhere over in that third column, or?
Most is a good way to describe it, but I don't want to commit publicly because we don't know that answer yet.
And there's the other piece to that, by the way, on that page, you didn't reference it, but the other part is we've got resources allocated for the grades 6 through 10 mathematics. And it could be quite possible when those resources come forward, they may be more expensive than what we budgeted, and we may shift money back and forth to make it all whole. So I don't think in net there's going to be any savings here in terms of expenditures on mathematics through the system for next year.
I'm hearing a couple of different things here, okay? One, we have money allocated for 6 to 10 mathematics, okay, which may be more expensive than what we've allocated, which opens up a door saying, what are those, and have you identified them at this point?
Well, you'll have that at the next meeting.
Okay. We approved a budget with $80,000 for textbook materials, okay? It would seem to me that there would need to be a motion from this board to move that to anything other than what it is on a line item. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, but we're going to adjust this budget one way or the other in May because we have to, because it's been reduced. So we could adjusted at that time when the board adjusts the whole rest of the budget to comply with that.
I'm just
Wanted to.
confused as to why there would be a cost into the writing of units. Is that typical of a curriculum? I didn't see
Yes.
that last time. And
Yeah,
what is involved in that cost?
It's usually found under the program implementation line, and it requires paying teachers to write. They're not writing during their teaching time, so they're either writing after school or particularly, most commonly, over the summer. And that's how we wrote our 3 through 5 units of study, mostly over the summer. So it's a salary, hourly salary.
You want to follow up on that, Mr. Liu?
Yes. Thank you very much. I understand then, because we don't have a text, we have to have teachers write the units, and that's what we're going to pay the teachers to do that.
Yep, that is our practice. Just like we would pay them over the summer to revise the progress report. We're going to need to do that. Teachers are going to come in on their own time to help us revise the progress report, and we pay them for that, just like we do for assessments. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Convertito, did you still have
Yeah,
questions?
I want to follow up on that.
Please.
If we're going to have teachers write units of study, does that mean we are taking the approach that we are not, in the next year, going to adopt a textbook?
No, I think that over the next year, we're going to be keeping our eyes open for any newly revised or released texts and materials for us to continuously review and consider. But we do need something for September, and we'd like something that is aligned with 3.5, and based on our current review and research, we did make the decision to move forward with units of study.
Mr. Liu.
I just got to say off the top of my head, it really does, to follow up on what Mr. Convertito just asked, is not using our money very well. I mean, we're going to spend money because we're not going to buy textbooks to have teachers write the text, so to speak. But then we might buy a text the next year. There were so many books that you had looked at, and even though there are favorites amongst people, it seems to me that I don't understand, again, why we're not having a textbook and instead of having the teachers write. And I do think this is an issue that has to be looked at in terms of this curriculum, because what are we doing? We're spending it twice. We're going to then buy a textbook, and then all of that curriculum money that we spent is down for that 1 year. I mean, I guess these are rhetorical questions, but it's something that I think we really, as a board, have to consider.
Thank you. Other questions from board members on the information presented or the original information on the curriculum? Mrs. Brand.
First of all, thank you. I had the opportunity to meet with you folks, and I do appreciate it. We went through a lot. I mean, I had something like 20 questions. It was a lot. And
was like
I
40
know it
questions, yeah.
generated a lot of what you're doing. Thank you. I am happy to hear about doing a parent guide for homework, because I think that's one of the primary communication pieces that parents relate to their students. I am concerned when we're talking at this juncture with a curriculum that's up for a vote that we still haven't really landed on what we're going to have is for homework for students. You're going to talk about people writing pieces for it. We had resources. And here's my concern. If we have kids in math and they come home with homework, and, it's math, and, parents learn math one way, their kids are learning a different language, it might be all the same math, but the verbiage can often be different. So a parent goes to help their child, and they'll look at the parent and say, you have it all wrong, you don't have the right words, Mommy, you don't know what you're talking about. And the parent wants to help, but the parent's not sure of how to go about this, and they don't have a resource. Yep. And at this juncture, I would like to have seen, what the pre-K resource is going to be, what grade 1 is going to be, kindergarten. So a parent then understands and has a frame of reference, can refer to it. They're more, as I said before, happy to support whatever's going on in the district, but they're caught in a vacuum if they can't. And then there's the frustration about trying to help their child. To me, that's such an essential component I think now more than ever, it is a concern of mine, and my other concern is I was hoping that if we had grade 3 through 5 in place with this type of model, that at this point we'd also have some data, some assessments to use showing, you have some?
Yep.
You
Yeah, we
do?
have some
You do?
early release data. Yes.
Oh, good, okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Very, very early. It comes from our own district assessments, so we have some highlights of areas of improvement that we've seen simply now, cautiously, over only 4 months of implementation of a 3-5 model.
You have copies of it? I'd love to see it.
No, we're just going to highlight some of the strands that have improved.
And part of what we have to keep in mind is that the curriculum document was adopted last spring, and so really we're not even through a full year yet with this, and so it is premature. But through our blue ribbon scores, we have seen an increase in all 3 grade levels, in grades 3, 4, and 5. The basic facts in grades 3 have actually gone up since last year, same with the area of logical reasoning. We're looking at models of operation in grade 4, and the problem solving in grade 4 has also gone up. Basic facts in grade 5, and computation with fractions has gone up in grade 5. So these are some highlighted areas of where we're seeing some increased performance overall in some of the data. It is really premature at this point to be bringing forward information because we're not even through the first full year of this yet. You know, teachers have been doing a terrific job, but there is some learning curve here as well. So we're pleased with we're going in the right direction.
So let me just give some context to that data so no one runs away with great excitement just yet. The data that we compared was January 2012 Blue Ribbon to January 2013 Blue Ribbon to see if that 4 months of implementation in grades 3, 4, and 5 of the new curriculum had any impact. Now, there are a lot of assumptions on that analysis, that the curriculum itself all alone did that, and with great teaching, of course. And what we did was we took a look at the 18 possible areas that are assessed through Blue Ribbon, and we tried to identify which areas showed an increase compared to last January. And those are some of those areas that Mr. Wakeman just highlighted. So based on 4 months of implementation, with a learning curve of learning, I think, Jen, you mentioned earlier, you know, any new grade that has, any grade with new curriculum takes time. Well, this applies here too. That 4 months of new curriculum does take some time, so there are a lot of factors that impact that. So cautionarily, we'll say we see a bump in some of our strands in mathematics as measured by the Blue Ribbon.
And so at some point, when you analyze the full year, you'll be able to bring forward that information.
Yes,
right?
sir.
I think Mr. Convertito had his hand up first, or what?
I just wanted to follow up on that question.
Okay, follow up.
When you said January 2012 compared to January 2013, was that so when they were 4th graders, how they improved as 5th graders, or it's 1 year's 5th graders compared to the next year's 5th graders?
Yeah, because we're trying to measure impact of curriculum, we were looking at 5th to 5th, 4th to 4th, 3rd to 3rd.
Thank you. Mr. Convertito.
Of the strands that you saw improvement on, it's my assumption that those were the strands that were covered in the first 4 months?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Were there, you left the door open, so I have to ask it. Were there strands that went the other way?
There are some strands that have gone the other way, and we're taking a look at those.
But they also may not have been taught yet, hence the cautionary tale.
I preface the ones that went up.
Any other questions from the board before we go to the public? Mr. Liu?
Thank you. Mr. Wakeman or Mrs. Anna-Katai-Leonard, can you explain flexible grouping?
Yes, we'd both like to. So we'll see if I miss anything, because he's our resident mathematician, of course. And flexible grouping, I believe we've addressed this with this board last year, and for some of the new members we'll refresh a bit, can occur across a grade level or within a classroom. That's been our definition in Fairfield. And flexible grouping suggests something that teachers do all the time in every area, basically. And I'm going to assume, Mr. Liu, you are asking about mathematics, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it? Oh, okay.
No, I'm
Oh, okay.
getting there. Flexible grouping occurs across a grade level based on a pre-assessment and typically occurs in units of study that are more foundational and basic in facts and skill-oriented units of study. And the students then are grouped according to their performance on the pre-assessment. Then a post-assessment is given. There's an analysis done by the grade level to see how students performed. And then as they move into the next unit, if it is one of those types of units, not more of a problem-solving inquiry-based unit, which are more heterogeneously grouped, another pre-assessment would be given and post-assessment. That practice is similar within classrooms as well, because if you take a look at a full unit, you were given 3 excerpts from a full unit. If you take a look at a full unit, we actually provide all pre and post assessments to all teachers commonly across a grade in every school. So teachers give pre-assessments in their classroom, and they provide small group instruction similar to reading within the classroom. And each school decides whether they're going to flexible group across a grade or within a classroom. Did I miss anything?
So just so I can make sure I'm saying this correctly in simpler language, or is that the kids are assessed, the kids who are doing math, get it right away are in one group, kids who are doing medium in another group, kids who don't get it are in a different group, and they're separated so that they can work on their strengths and weaknesses.
I don't know if I'd put it that way.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'd put it that way,
Okay.
but I think the best way to think about it is in terms of differentiating. It's a way of differentiating for students. And the first part of differentiating is to diagnose what is a student's understanding. Where are they developmentally? What are some of the misconceptions they have? So you may have, and I'll use the angle example, some children who think that the length of the ray determines the angle. And so you may want to pull a small group together who focuses specifically on that. That may just be within the context of a single class. You may have some more foundational skills that students need to work on. This differentiation happens more in when we're talking some of the more skill-based or practice pieces, if it is across grade levels. Again, if there's more sort of the inquiry or active engagement, for example, I'll cite that lesson number 12, children may be heterogeneously grouped and working together, all working towards understanding and practicing measuring of angles, as well as understanding angles as being additive. Some children will be doing it without the protractors, others will need that support, and perhaps even the teacher's guidance to help support that.
So basically, you're taking it a step further, and it's any type of grouping, whether it's a proficiency, whether it's something that okay, it's any that it can be. So what I want to understand is and because I understand that this flexible grouping does occur in some schools.
Across a grade level is what I'm assuming you mean.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Because flex grouping, in my opinion, happens in every classroom.
Okay. I meant.
Across grade level.
Yeah. Isn't that slightly counter to the curriculum model of groups of children working together to helping to teach each other, the ones pulling along some that are, let's say, who understand one thing, pulling the other ones along in different directions?
Okay, I'm hearing a couple things in your question, so if I don't answer it, let me know.
Sure,
Okay? First of all, I'm hearing the assumption that the purpose of grouping is to have kids help each other, and that is very far from the truth. In the elementary schools, when
You mean
we're
flexible grouping? Or you meant just in a group together as the curriculum is trying to do?
well, according to the flex grouping you're trying to define, right?
No, no, no.
Okay, sorry.
I
guess I was.
and maybe I've got this wrong too. So that's why we ask these questions, right? Is I thought part of our curriculum that you're proposing is that students are given problems and they're trying to figure them out themselves. That's a part of it.
Right, and for the purpose of sharing their strategies and their thinking.
Right.
And to push one another's thinking, but not necessarily, if I understood you correctly, to help each other along and in a suggestion that they're teaching each other and
So it's not about
so-
teaching each other? Because I
Well, it's learning from one another. Sure.
Right.
Learning from one another.
So learning is learning from one another. The other one is receiving, so one is teaching, so to speak.
Right, so I don't, I guess what I'm doing is reading into your question a bit, sorry. I
Maybe.
don't want to assume that kids are teaching each other in the place of the teacher.
Right, but that is part of the experience. I mean, the teacher is supposed to sort of step back a little bit and say, figure it out yourselves. Thus, they are
In the role of a facilitator.
facilitator. Thus, they are experimenting, learning, and teaching one another. I don't know if you want to put another word on it, but I mean, it seems to me that that's kind of the experimental, catalyst of this. But what I guess I don't understand is, then when you go with flexible grouping, which sort of weeds out certain strengths and weaknesses, how does that feed into this? And why I ask this question is that it's my understanding that there are two schools that use this method. I understand that there are two schools that use this method across the grade, which are Burr and Dwight.
That's right.
And their scores are higher than the rest of the system.
I would request that you take a look at the scores we provided you in the folder.
Okay. So-
Mr. Liu, if I could, I think you're getting into the instructional methodology of grades 3 to 5, and tonight's agenda item is K2, so
Not-
please follow up, but I think at some
There
point,
is no flexible grouping in K2 anywhere.
so follow up, but perhaps if you have more information that you want,
All right, I think we,
you
I
can do it
I think
online
we've
as
done
well.
this enough. Thank you.
Did you have any other comment that you wanted to make in relationship to Mr. Liu's comment?
Not at this time, thank you.
Other questions that board members have? Mrs. Kennelly?
Just one, or I'm sure it ends up being a few. One, I'd also like to repeat Mrs. Brand's comment that it was nice to hear about the parent guide. I think that was, that's an explicit focus of this summer is heartening to hear. The curriculum, by and large, I think is, strong. We'll see where it goes, where it could be moved. This SBAC test that we're having to operate with very, very little released problems, which could affect this as well. I know there'll be tweaking for years to come. The most of the debate has been regarding the textbook. And so given additional districts now moving towards Singapore, let me back off that. I should start by saying thank you again for the 2.5 hours that you spent with myself and with Mrs. Gerber. It was extremely helpful. We had a lot of questions for you, and I had told you that I thought that we needed to hear one more time in what way specifically that Singapore right now is not the best option for us. There were a lot of great things that came out of our conversation, but I do think that they need to be, shared. And I'd like, as a leader of our elementary school curriculum and as our math whiz for this level, I'd like to hear from you again, why we're not
New title,
following that
Walter,
direction.
Math
No
Whiz.
pressure.
So we are defining who is the leader and who is the math whiz?
I'm sure there are other names for me too, but we won't talk about that tonight. All right, so Ms. Kennelly, we did spend 2.5 hours doing this, so I'll try to summarize that in 60 seconds or less, possibly. We've done some work with taking our units of study in grades 3, 4, 5, because that's where they're developed, and doing a side-by-side analysis with the programs that we reviewed a couple months ago, for the purpose of understanding where did we fall short in expectation and rigor, where did we meet the standard equally, and where did we surpass. I will say that we found all three areas in every analysis we did. But when it comes to the program that has been mentioned at this time, we found ourselves, based on our analysis side by side, equal to in high-level expectations and rigor, equal to basic fact development, equal to conceptual understanding and instructional approach, and in some cases, as we pointed out to you with evidence, exceeded that. And that's something we could show you, again, clearly. And if a board member would like that 2.5 hour prep time, as we did, we're happy to extend it once again. So we are confident that the units of study and the instructional model that we can implement based on the pre-K2 curriculum that is before the board this evening can be equal to, and in many cases, exceeding the programs we've reviewed in the past. Additionally, as Mr. Wakeman identified, we've built in our differentiated instruction. And we'd like to make that part of our units of study really organic. We'd like to continue to develop those pieces. The more we learn about student needs and instructional strategies, particularly those identified through our data teams, we think we can differentiate our lessons, whether they're across a grade or within a classroom, with great ease if we have control of what we're building. If we build it, we can ensure the careful balance of basic fact and conceptual understanding. We can also ensure that we don't force kids to go from concrete to pictorial to abstract, that we can allow kids to enter into where they are ready to enter. And in building our own, we think we can do that, while still honoring the research-based concrete pictorial abstract approach to learning mathematics. We also feel like we gave you a great example in lesson 12, the second one of the three, on how we can apply mathematics in a real-world setting in a real investigative way where kids are learning from one another and teachers are facilitating, while also at the same time, like the first unit we showed you, there's direct instruction by a teacher. And at the elementary school, there's always the flow of both of those models. It's just a natural way that we do business. So we feel like, based on all our research and experience in 3-5 and what we know and hold true in our core values of mathematical instruction, that we can develop something equally as rigorous and high level. That 2.5 hours is the summary.
Thank you. Mrs. Connelly, did you say you have a second question, maybe? Different topic?
And there's one other point you had mentioned, which I think is worth repeating, which is the idea that with the SBAC test out there, and textbooks undoubtedly going to be updating, that, as to Mr. Liu's point about spending our money wisely, that this course of action may very well be the wiser course of action, because before putting out that investment, let's see what the publishers do come out with. Again, it is absolutely a certain degree of a leap of faith, which we talked about faith as well in our 2.5 hours. So, but I think that's
And it would have been
important.
easier in many ways to go ahead and purchase something than develop something. And I think it's worth noting at this table that while there are some towns jumping on that bandwagon, there are also many towns that are choosing our course of action as well, that they're waiting.
Okay, I think Dr. Title wants to make a comment.
Yeah, and this is more of a general comment. I mean, you've heard, gotten a number of letters from our staff. I mean, we have, I don't know how many folks out there, 50, 60 people out here representing the teachers, the principals, the math resource teachers. There are many paths to success here. It's an uncertain path because the Common Core is uncertain, the SBAC is uncertain, and you can see many districts are taking different paths here. But we have a staff committed to this. This isn't just Anna or Walter.
Or Math Whiz.
Right? Or the Math Whiz, you know. And we have a unity among the teaching staff and the math resource teachers and the principals, who you've all heard, who really believe in this and can make it happen. And I think no matter what change initiative you try to put in place, that's more important than anything. But the people on the ground really believe in it and can make it work. So it's trust and a belief in our teaching staff and our experts on the ground who are working with our kids every day. And given that there are multiple possibilities here, seems to me that the proper course of action is to go with the people who are going to be implementing it with our children. Because ultimately, any change initiative is only as good as it's done by the people who are actually implementing it, not me in my office. So that's just a general comment about any change initiative, but I believe that, you know, obviously they'll need support no matter what we're doing. There'll be professional development, there'll be curriculum development, assessment development. They're committing to do an awful lot of work. They've done it so far, and I think they'll do a great job with it.
After we go to the public, there'll be an opportunity for board members to make other comments or questions. But before we go to the public, is there any final comments or questions people have? Mrs. Brand and Mr. Convertito? Okay.
Yeah. Just one quick question. Did you have the opportunity to present this to the elementary staff?
What part? I'm sorry.
The curriculum to the elementary staff. I mean, we've had the privilege of having all of this. Did you have the opportunity to present it to all the elementary staff?
Not in the form of a presentation, but they receive the documents for review. And math science teachers intimately are involved with their staff, pre-K2, to go over the curriculum pieces, any feedback, input, and such not. Yeah. And they had also a hand in the review of the text materials that we had.
That was a smaller group, though, correct?
No, we made the text materials available to every single elementary school, open to any pre-K, kindergarten through second grade teacher, and many principals, if not all, provided release time for K1 and 2 teachers to go and actually handle the books, review them, and provide feedback.
Thank you.
This is audience participation, so this is the time for public comment. As you know, 2 minutes. We are approving the, up for vote, I should say, the K2 curriculum. There may be other issues that have been discussed in the past, but what is before the board is the adopting the Common Core State Standards K2 curriculum, which I'll say is 95% the Common Core standards and 5% tweaking. I'm not sure that ratio is exactly right, but I know it adds up to 100. So while people are advancing up to the microphone, if they want to comment, I'm wondering if the other math score that we got information on earlier from UConn, whether anybody has kept track of that. They're up by 19.
Need those TVs turned on.
And they being UConn, of course, up by 19. In case any of you are interested. Please step forward, state your name and address.
Anthony Abazia, 76 Juniper Lane. And I asked the board for a little bit of indulgence because I hear several times angles are additive. So I'm facing forward. I'll turn 90 degrees. Then I'll turn 180 degrees. Then I'll turn 90 degrees. Now, have I done anything to change where I am, or am I just spinning in a circle? I can't imagine us using the current text that we have any further. This Forsman text is outdated and should be replaced. I don't think that I have a lot of confidence in relying on the teachers to write a text when we have people who've already spent careers doing that. And, you know, being one of the taxpayers, I'd like to have more of a say in what's being done rather than having people just change $80,000 of what's being spent of our money to invest in our children. We need to make sure that we are moving forward. I think the board had many excellent questions. I want to make sure we're moving forward and not just in a circle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please step forward, state your name and address.
My name is Eileen Liu. I'm at 101 Waterville Road in Southport, Connecticut. So thank you very much for all of your time, and I appreciate all of the teachers' hard work on this new curriculum. I saw the size of that binder, and it was incredibly impressive, just the sheer volume of it. But before you vote tonight, I would respectfully ask you to consider a few points that I've taken some time to write. I would like to please make sure that an approval of the curriculum tonight does not turn into an excuse to disqualify consideration of other excellent math texts and instructional methods, like Singapore or Math in Focus or any of the others. Just because they don't perfectly match the curriculum, which I've heard already. I mean, does it have to match perfectly? I don't know. It's the Common Core that our curriculum is based off of, and many texts can offer that opportunity to match off perfectly. Clearly, you're going to need to supplement. I think almost everything will need some supplementation. But I don't want this to be an instant disqualification of valid text options. And if this is the case, the vote should be delayed until text and instructional methods can be considered alongside the curriculum and properly assessed in aggregate against other programs in aggregate if you're going to bind them so tightly. If this is curriculum alone, fine. If this is curriculum but with this instructional and text linked along with it, then I think there's a problem here. 2, If the proposed curriculum allows multiple texts and instructional methods to satisfy its requirements with light supplementation, then I think this is a fine discussion, with the caveat that a deadline be set for the selection of a well-vetted world-class text and instructional method. The selection process should heavily weight a program with mathematical content, sequencing that's considered. It should heavily weight the concept of mastering the topics, and aggregate preparedness for algebra success versus the other programs, not just in isolation. I worry that we're creating this thing, this instructional method, in isolation without directly comparing and openly discussing the pros and cons.
Mrs. Liu?
Yes.
Unfortunately, your time is up. If you would
I don't
like...
have to, this is 2 minutes exactly.
Unfortunately, she's measured it. So if you have that in writing, please feel free to submit it
Can I
to
just
the
do my
board.
conclusion?
Huh?
I'm just going to do my conclusion. All right?
No, please,
No
I do have
conclusion?
to stay with the 2 minutes if I could. If you just pass it in, we'll make
I'll
copies
give it to
for
my
everybody.
husband. Thanks.
Thank you. State your name and address, please.
Sure, I have math handout. Can I hand it to you before I start?
Please do. Bring it over to the...
Sorry, I forgot.
She'll pass it around.
So there's one short. Tricia Donovan, 164 Tainter Drive. I worked in the math field as a non-dollar sovereign bond trader and currency trader for many years, and I'm truly concerned about my children's math education. I've gotten in the habit of keeping my children's math homework so that I can see what they're doing, because otherwise I have no idea. And in this performance assessment that I gave to you, I put it on a math forum that I monitor regularly, that I know is populated by expert mathematicians and curriculum experts. And as you can see, this, the way this is worded is extremely open-ended and causes a lot of confusion. I'll quickly read it. Mr. Chase needed new carpet for a classroom at the school. He bought 100 square feet of carpet. The length of the classroom is 20 feet. He wants to put a wood trim around the perimeter of the room. How many feet of wood will he need? And the question asks for the area, the perimeter, the length, the width. And it also asks the child to write down the time they started the question, the time they ended the question. When I put this on the math forum, I got replies from James Milgram, who's Professor Emeritus of Mathematics at Stanford U. He said, this problem is ill-posed and has no solution. One has to make an assumption that is not justified by the statement of the problem, namely that the carpet will exactly cover the floor. Then, by the assumptions given, you could get the width as 5. But what if the carpet was irregularly shaped and had to be trimmed? What if the carpet was far from enough to cover the room? What if the carpet was larger than the floor area? Another person, Erin Johnson, who's an expert in K-12 curricula, says, problem number 2 is a disaster, a great example of how open-ended questions can go horribly wrong. Several items, but not an exhaustive list, that are wrong with this question is, the configuration of the classroom is never stated, rectangular, trapezoidal, triangular. It is not stated what the carpet is going to be used for, covering the floor, the walls, cut into pieces for kids to sit on, etc. It is not stated if the principal would use all the carpet or just some of it. Not to mention, you always order up by 10% when ordering carpet, tile, or other things. With respect to the time part of the question, asking fourth graders
Mrs.
to
Donovan?
use it. Yes.
Unfortunately, the time is up.
Time is up. Okay.
Thank
I
you
will
very much.
send this in. I would just ask that if we're not going to choose a text, may we please vet all the resources that we're going to use very
Thank
carefully.
you very much. Thank you for saving us on liability insurance by not bumping your head on the TV.
Right. Thank you.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Jerry McCormick. I live at 101 Waterville Road in Southport, and I would actually like to let my wife finish her.
It's your 2 minutes. No, your 2 minutes. She can't come up.
Okay,
but
that's
you can
fine.
finish the
That's
2
fine.
minutes. Yeah.
The bottom line, and to continue from her comments, is that we respectfully suggest that you consider the new Singapore math text that's coming out with the Stronger Teacher Guide. This patchwork approach, which the administration is recommending, is going to be very expensive and very flawed, as some of the comments from the board. What is going to happen with that money? And what's going to guarantee that there's really going to be a world-class set of materials? How are we going to vet that? We hope actually that you ask that the Board of Education vet that as you replace one text with several. For example, coupling Singapore math, Saxon investigations could be very compelling if done right. But the combination of Scott Forsman, Fosnot, Marilyn Burns, those are flawed texts with a very flawed educational model. We must support our teachers with world-class resources and the proper amount of teacher training. let's use the Common Core standard as an opportunity to bring the math program up to world class. We need all of our kids to be challenged and pushed to optimize their potential, not just the bottom quartile. We want to take pride in being part of a district that strives to be competitive with best in the nation. We're looking to the Board of Education to make sure that there's clear evidence before selection in investing in success in the math program. If the research is transparent and complete, I'm sure that we will get to a program that will include the rigor and qualities of the Singapore math program, and that's what I'm asking you to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Reigate Road. Okay, I'm confused. In 6 to 8, curriculum was a textbook, and what we were piloting was not curriculum, it was an instructional model. And now we don't have a textbook, but the instructional model is now called curriculum, and I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. To hear in 3 through 5, you've got 17 resources in order to teach math. As a parent, I will tell you, that's slightly confusing. I don't want a parent manual. No offense to those who suggested it was good. My concern is this. We have teachers, we have parents, it's called communication. We all need to be on the same page. We all need to work together to make sure our children succeed. I don't question whether or not teachers can write curriculum, but if we have a textbook in 6 through 8, I don't understand if those same companies produce K through 5, why we aren't able to look at them for continuation of education. My concern is that as parents, we are sitting here attempting to answer questions, and I know I've been told there are multiple points of entry in math. However, when I teach my son something he maybe didn't get in school, and I give him the 1970s, 1980s math jargon, I am told that once he comes to school, the teacher says, well, that's not the way we do it, even though you did get the right answer. If there's multiple points of entry, there's multiple ways of teaching. I agree to that. But a textbook is what a lot of us parents need in order to help our children at home. Not a manual, not just the handouts. There's got to be a reference guide for parents. And I'm not disputing that the teachers think this is good. I think that's wonderful. My problem is there's a breakdown where parents have been moved out of the equation, and we need to be brought back in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. State your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Annie Braley. I am at 82 Bivens Avenue in Fairfield. First, thank you so much for this time. We've spoken to quite a few members, myself and a couple of the parents, and one of the biggest concerns is that now if we go ahead and vote this curriculum in, that it would be indefinitely strung out, that this written model would be considered the Bible going forward. We're asking the Board of Ed, please hold the administration responsible and tie in somehow that they need to have a text. I don't think that it's unfair for us to speculate that what they can do in 2 months is going to be better than what a team of experts spent 20 years with vast amount of resources have done in the last 25 years. So I don't think it's unfair for us to question how that program that's written in the next 2, 3, 4 months would be better than something that's well vetted and well sequenced. And also, just as a point of reference, the Common Core is actually written with Singapore primary as a primary reference point. I'm not saying that that's the only way to go, but that's something we need to consider if we want to be a town that's better than everybody else. Plenty of other towns who are much better performing than us with a similar situation have gone the way of Singapore math, and I'm not sure why something that is good enough for them is not good enough for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. State your name and address, please.
I'm Pam Williams, and I'm the math science teacher at Riverfield, and my address is 36 Golden Hill, Trumbull. I want to thank the board for supporting and recognizing the professionalism, expertise, and dedication of the teachers, and for the board's commitment to what is best for students in our district. And I truly believe that what is best for our students in this district is the adoption of the new pre-K2 curriculum. I feel very fortunate and privileged to be teaching in a district that is not only current in its mathematical practices, but has had the vision and foresight to develop curriculum that is at high level and aligned with the Common Core. As a math science teacher and having taught in the classroom for many years, I have witnessed students and teachers learning math in a new and better way. Both teachers and students at a much deeper level. They have become better problem solvers. They are able to explain their thinking in amazing ways. Overall, they are stronger mathematicians. The new curriculum provides a range of high-level mathematical experiences, develops deep conceptual understanding, has rigor and differentiation embedded, focuses on basic fact fluency. I do believe in our curriculum. Please continue to show your support and respect for the district mathematics professionals and teachers by voting to approve the pre-K2 curriculum tonight.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Bethany Winchester. I am a second grade teacher at Riverfield. Some of you may remember me from last month. I participated in one of the trials for Stepping Stones. I have been very invested in this math process for a long time. I am here again tonight to ask you to support the pre-K2 curriculum. This is a document that I know aligns with the Common Core. It is a document that I want to see my children have in second grade. As a teacher, my concern is that if we adopted a resource that as a teacher, I worry more about the standards than I do the resource. It is very important to me that my students have the most up-to-date, rigorous standards. I ask you tonight to listen to the professionals, those that are here and those that have written letters. Please approve the pre-K2 curriculum and align us with the district, with the state, and the nation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. State your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Nancy Meehan. I'm the math science teacher at Mill Hill, and I wasn't planning on speaking. You probably received my letter on behalf of the Mill Hill staff, but I feel the need to say that I am the oldest math science teacher. I have been here since 1995, not literally, but I have been the math person at Mill Hill since 1995, and I have seen many curriculums, I have seen many instructional models and resources, and over the last several years. And one thing I can so openly and honestly say is I have never, in all the years I've been here, seen students so engaged and teachers so engaged, and teachers and paraprofessionals saying things like, I wish I was taught this way. So I felt like I wanted to say that, and I wanted to also piggyback, I didn't time myself, so I'm going off the cuff here, on something that Anna said. As a math teacher, I find myself in social situations a lot, and I say, what do you do? I'm a math teacher, and people too easily say, math, I was never good at math. You never hear somebody say, oh, reading, you're a reading teacher, I was never good at reading. So we're not hearing people say that anymore. We're not hearing our children say that. We're walking out, I go in, work with teachers, do a lesson, walk out, and kids are so excited and engaged and enjoying what they're doing, but it's not just about that. They're not just having fun. They're becoming lifelong learners.
Thank you very much. If there are other speakers, I'd appreciate it if you kind of got in line so I'd had a sense of how many more, if this is the last two. But go ahead. No, please go ahead. State your name and
Kevin
address.
Chase, principal at Mill Hill Elementary School. I guess the infamous carpet layer. I am not in that trade, I can assure you, and I had no part in that question, but I think it is just a practice assessment that one of the teachers was using, I'm hoping. I do want to say that I don't want to repeat what everyone has been saying, but I guess I can quantify it by when I walk into classrooms, what Mrs. Meehan just said. I see excitement. I see engagement. I see children doing math in a way that that I never dreamed of as a kid. For me, it was sitting in that textbook and just sitting there, doing the problems, all the same, despite the fact that I might have mastered and done well on numbers 1 through 20, well, I still had to do 20 more of them, all of the same. Now, I'm not saying that one way is better than another necessarily, but I am saying that you support this curriculum because I have seen the benefits of it. My time is up, apparently. No, I will say that...
Yeah, the pink sheet tells you when your time is up.
Yeah, apparently. I will say that as a teacher, I used to always say, look, if I can create a safe environment, a comfortable environment, it will be an engaging environment. It is safe, it is comfortable, children are taking risks, and they are improving in their understanding of mathematics. And I'm proud of the curriculum that we've put forward in 3 through 5, and I think we would be equally as proud and well represented for K-2.
Thank you very much. State your name and address, please.
Nikki Vanoski, 1485 Brookside Drive. I didn't plan on speaking, but I wanted to share a quick story. I'm a certified Connecticut teacher, regular and special education, and I'm currently at home with my 3 elementary school-age children. About a month ago, they come home off the bus. It's a half-hour bus ride. We're the last stop on the way home. And my 2nd grader has his hand like this, and he says, "You're going to be mad at me." I said, "Well, why?" He's like, "Well, I wrote on it. I had these numbers in my head, and I had to get them out." So he wrote double-digit regrouping problem on his hand and numbers everywhere. My 4th grader comes over and looks at it, and the 2 of them stand in my driveway and start talking about how each one of them, with their different knowledge base, would solve this problem on my son's hand. And as a parent and as a teacher, nothing makes me happier than to see my kids talking math an hour after school gets out. So with that, I want to ask you respectfully to choose to stand behind our professional staff, support our curriculum leaders, and demonstrate your faith in our teachers. I ask you to continue to provide students with a rigorous curriculum as a means of improving student achievement, and to please vote in favor of the pre-K through 2 math curriculum as presented.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Steve Poricelli. I'm a 4th grade teacher at North Stratfield School, and I hadn't planned on speaking tonight either, but I did want to reiterate what some of the other people have said, and the new math curriculum certainly does help our kids to think differently about math, and it's amazing to see the light bulbs go on sometimes in the classroom as our kids are working together. But also, as Dr. Title said, our 3 through 5 teachers are unified and committed to this program. We've had professional development. We're looking forward to going forward with it. The administration has asked for our input and made changes when it's been necessary. And I think most importantly, or also importantly, we talked about the different verbiage with different curriculum. It would be nice to have the K through 2 using the same verbiage and the same curriculum that we're using 3 to 5, and I encourage you to approve it.
Thank you very much. Are you the last speaker, I hope, so that we can move along? Thank you very much.
I'll be quick.
Name
My
and
name
address.
is Martha Murphy. I live at 720 Wellington Drive in Fairfield. I have 2 children at Dwight Elementary School, and I'm a teacher at Riverfield School. I've been teaching there for 13 years. I had the opportunity to teach 5th grade for many years. I'm now in 2nd. I'm speaking tonight in support of the proposed pre-K to 2 math curriculum. I had many opportunities while I was teaching 5th grade to watch students experience success with this new balanced approach to mathematics. And then I was able to see students working together. They would look at each other and say, "I finally got this problem." Like the gentleman said before, you'd see the light bulb go off. Then I moved to 2nd grade, and I had the opportunity also to teach one of the units in the balanced approach to math, and I've seen kids come away with much stronger number sense than in the past. Students are able to compose and decompose numbers with ease. They're able to add and subtract 2-digit numbers using multiple strategies that they come up with on their own. I've seen my class make incredible growth and gain confidence in math this year. I feel very strongly that this new balanced approach to math is the best way to teach math to kids, including my own. Thank you for supporting the expertise and the dedication of the teachers. And I ask you to please approve the proposed pre-K to 2 math curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Out of deference to the public, I'll allow 2 more, but are you the last one? Correct? You are the last one. Okay, so if some of you have the urge to stand up, these will be the last 2 recognized. Please go forward.
Dawn Llewellyn, 524 Sturgis Road. I just want to thank all the teachers for all their hard work, for putting this curriculum together before the board, and for the board for sitting with the teachers to understand it. But I currently have 7th graders, and when they were in 5th grade, they did a unit study on balanced approach, and it was the Subway sandwich. And I have to tell you, they're twins. They would come home and they would talk about this program and say it was going too slow for them. And once they grasped it, they still had to go over how to break apart the Subway sandwich and look at it in fractions. And even though they grasped it, they still had to help other kids understand it. And that was their experience. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's a quick one, but thank you very much. And I hope, though, the Board of Ed looks at this curriculum and decides that we have to use a textbook to align with it, or even set a date that we're going to decide on one, because I think it's important that these children have a textbook, and not just any textbook, something that's proven. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker of the evening, from the public on this issue, that is. Please
Hi.
state your name and address.
Michelle Baker, 200 Pepperidge Circle. I did not have any intention of speaking tonight, but I have been at every Board of Ed meeting listening to people criticize the math program, the curriculum, the development, and I've heard lots and lots of positives also. First of all, I am standing up because I feel that I owe it to my 5th and 7th grade teachers right now who have done a tremendous job teaching my children math. They have brought my daughter, who has sometimes struggled, and challenged her and made her feel successful. Both of my students have succeeded, and I thank you for that tremendously. I just want to say that as a teacher in a neighboring district, teachers don't stand at the microphone at a Board of Ed meeting if they do not feel absolutely certain that what they have at their hands is working. A ship is only as good as the person at its helm. Please respect that teachers will not advocate for a program or curriculum with or without a text if they do not strongly believe that it is the best thing for their students. I have written to the board. I've really said I could go on, and really I think that the most beneficial thing I can say here is to please listen to the teachers and the administrators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the board. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Liu.
Thank you. Question to Dr. Title. Are we going to have an opportunity to have a math text, or are the resources that we currently have going to be our text?
Well, we're going to start next year with the resources that we have, but we're always reviewing additional resources, and we may find that we will be purchasing some additional resources between now and September if warranted, and as additional resources become available to review, we will review them as they come out, and if we find one that we think would be a good fit for us, we'd bring it forward to the board. That could be on a rolling basis as publishers produce different resources. Our folks are continuously looking at both supplemental and basic resources, so that's how we're going to go with it.
So then, just to be clear, so there's no hard date for any text. At this point, we have the resources as you've stated, and that's going to be the quote-unquote text for our for this curriculum.
Right, the resources to implement the curriculum.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. I would just like to say that, I guess I could have been more supportive of the curriculum if we were going to get a text, but I can't vote for this in its current, given that this text, I think, or the resources are so outdated and have just been, from everything I've read, are not going to help our district, and I think just creates a, let's not do the clapping. Sorry, Phil.
No, I appreciate your comment.
It's just, I think even with the comment about the carpeting is that we don't know who's doing what, and the idea of having a text and a strong guideline is a much smarter way to go. As a few parents said, they've got professionals who have hard data, several studies on these texts that have gone on for years, and yet what we're trying to do is bank on, and I love our teachers and I think they do a great job. I do not doubt their enthusiasm and passion, but what we're doing is we're telling them to write a curriculum that has no hard data. We don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm not trying to think negatively or positively, but then there's a gamble. Instead of having a text and working to make a curriculum to go with or along a text where we know that it has some proven merit, and I just think that if we're going to spend our money, and this is a budget thing as well, we should be thinking, we should just be thinking a little clearly on this.
Thank you very much. Other comments that people want to make? Mr. Kerry. And Mr. Fattabine, do you wish to make a comment?
So just the chair to the team, and I just want to reiterate and re-ask a question I asked last time. The curriculum that we're voting on is the standard that we're trying to achieve. Just to be clear, in terms of how we achieve that from an instructional model, from a program, from a text that we will potentially select later on, we're not precluded from anything based on this structure.
That's correct.
Okay. In the lengthy discussions that I've heard and the research I've done and the research that other board members have been kind enough to share with me that they've done, this does not seem that unusual to me. One of the shining models that's been held up is Westport, and my understanding is that they've built their own middle school curriculum because they didn't find anything that met their needs, and that was to piggyback on top of Singapore. So I'm very pleased with the process and the transparency and inclusiveness in this pilot, looking at the different programs. And what I've surmised is our team has chosen to do the hardest thing, which is to build it specifically to our students here in Fairfield. I certainly don't think that that's going to be how we go forever, and I certainly hope not, because that's going to require a lot of work every year. But as the new test is revealed and the textbooks start to map to that, I think we'll have a better chance of buying something that's current, so we're not buying a textbook every 2 or 3 years. So I am very comfortable with this, and I'm appreciative of the fact that through this pilot process, our team has gone into this with our eyes wide open and said, yes, we want to do the hardest thing for our students and the hardest thing for the students in Fairfield. So thank you, and I definitely will be supporting this. I don't think this precludes us from moving in any direction moving forward, and I look forward to further discussions on texts as they become available.
Mr. Fattabine, and then Mrs. Brand has a comment, and we have some on the other side of the table.
Well, I guess we are only voting on this curriculum. We're not voting on approving a text because a text has not been recommended. I think that's an accurate statement. But what is being done is what is going to be done, as I understand, is there's going to be resources developed internally through the existing math employees or teachers to develop what I would call de facto text. Resource materials are going to be used in teaching this curriculum. And the question arises to me is that since we are charged with the obligation to approve text once they are recommended and adopted by the board to be used within the classroom, to what extent are we going to be obligated to review the so-called de facto text of this developed curriculum that's being used in the classroom? Is that at some point I would think would be brought forward to the board in a consolidated form for some sort of approval or not? I think that's sort of a question, which I don't know the answer to. But tonight our only charge is to approve this curriculum document and not a text.
Correct. I'll leave it to somebody to, not tonight, but answer the question whether the requirement to approve a textbook then goes to the supplemental materials that teachers use. My guess is somebody will say that's a stretch, but you never know. But we're not approving a textbook tonight, we're only approving the curriculum, so that's an interesting question. It's an open question. I think Mrs. Brand wanted to go next, and then Mr. Convertito, and then Mrs. Kennelly.
In fact, it was funny because that's actually one of the things that I said at a prior meeting as well, that I had a concern, since we're going to be using something that not only the teachers have continuity, what they're using grade to grade, that the parents appreciate what that is, so we have collaboration from parents as well. I have no doubt whatsoever, based on the description, that a lot of students seem to be much more engaged in math, and I'm thrilled. I also firmly believe that, quite frankly, whatever we put in front of our teachers, they're going to do the best and make the most of what's before them. I do believe, however, that things are different now. When we put a curriculum forward, it just can't be good. It's going to have to be great. It's going to have to be data-driven. Though I appreciate you had results, I would have really loved to have some results sitting before me to really go over them, because we've got to hit it out of the park. And the reason we have to hit it out of the park is, one, student achievement is being assessed more than ever. Our faculty's assessments, their evaluations, their jobs are going to rely on how well our students do. And if we don't give them a wow out of the park curriculum, the tools to do that, they are at a handicap. The same goes for the administrators. I think now more than ever we're seeing that tie in with the outcomes. It isn't just about how well you worked with a child, it's whether that child progressed. So I will tell you, though I'm pleased with what I'm hearing, I find it promising, I don't think it's there yet. I'd like to see test results before I move. I'm not confident we're there. I do think it is moving in the right direction, but I will not be supporting it because I do not believe it is ready right now for the, and particularly with the impact I think it will have on so many folks in the district.
Thank you. Mr. Convertito and Mrs. Kennelly.
This has probably been one of my toughest decisions on this board since I've been on it. I have met with teachers, I have met with parents, I have observed classrooms, I have watched third grade kids do pre-algebra. I have spent an enormous amount of time reading articles and research on this, and it came down to basically one question, and it really just happened with me last week in talking with people about it and who wanted what and this and that, and I finally looked at them and said, either I trust our professionals or I trust professionals in some other district, okay? And to me, I'd rather trust our professionals, okay? They're the people I know, they're the people who are invested in this, okay? And so I will be supporting this, and I hope it moves forward.
Mrs. Kennelly.
Wish I had these organized in a better order, but I think some important points I'd like to reiterate in terms of why I'll be supporting the curriculum. Mr. Carey's point, I think, was critical, that we have established explicitly that approval of this curriculum does not preclude the addition of a text later. That speaks directly to one of the points that a member of the public raised, and I think it's very important that it's out there, that we're aware of that and looking to follow up on it. I did, in the course of my 2.5-hour conversation with staff, you know, let's put right out there, we are going to be getting test results soon, and as they are well aware, you know, I didn't even need to say it, but we had a conversation about it anyway. We'll be asking for that data. It'll be a matter of public record, and we're going to get feedback very, very quickly on, are we moving in the right direction? Are we matching the pace of the districts around us as they implement their curriculum via their textbook choice? And are they beginning to outpace us, or are we beginning to outpace them? And I do think at this point in time, we do need to trust our professionals, but knowing that we're going to be asking for the verification very shortly, and that we can bring up this textbook issue, and that it will be able to go right in sync with our curriculum. Because You know, in terms of that wow factor, we've also got the Mrs. Brand reference. As measured by what? And that's part of our problem, is that we're at such a point in flux here. With a new test about to come out, Ms. Thailand had also mentioned that she wants to reevaluate which assessments we're using now as well. So there's going to be data flying all over the place with various degrees of reliability. But the one thing we do know is that our curriculum has to align with the Common Core, and that we do a disservice to the curriculum we already approved for 3 through 5 if we don't do that. Now, are we going to have the proper tools to get us there? We're going to get feedback on that very quickly. I also think it's important to acknowledge the one point I wrote down from the public comment. Not only is it not unfair for the public to question, I personally thank the public for all the questioning they have done starting last October, November. They have brought so much to my attention. I have learned so much more about math, and you have fulfilled a vital role, and it won't be forgotten, and I think this board is going to be vigilant on this matter, in large part thanks to you as well. And finally, the one part that I get around to with, specifically with Singapore, is the one district that gets trotted out as a endorser of Singapore, North Middlesex and Massachusetts. Rave about it, have fabulous success with it, but at the end of the day, the one thing that was vital that they stipulate for the success of that program is administrative and staff support. And right now in our district, we don't have that. And that's because they have something else that they believe in. This isn't something that can be forced, but I think they will be obviously eager for the feedback as well that we're going to be getting shortly from all these resulting tests. And if we don't get the results that we want, if we don't have that wow factor, if we're not measuring at the top, then maybe that will change minds there within our staff. On the other hand, if we get what I hope we get, which is fabulous results and improvements across all strands, that will be the validation that we are hoping to see. But at the end of the day, we have to have a curriculum in line with the Common Core. We have to have a curriculum that's in line with 3 through 5, and for that reason, I will be supporting it.
Any other final comments that people want to make? Mrs. Iacona?
Through the chair to Mr. Convertito and Mrs. Kennelly, thank you. I think you both summarized this up very well, and I just want to reiterate what I said at the last meeting, which is that I trust and believe in the teachers and our administrative staff who have taken the time to do this. And I again want to reiterate that I appreciate the fact that I was able to go in and see it in action. I mentioned before that I have a first grader and a fourth grader, so I just haven't been sitting at the board table listening to this. We live it in my house 5 days a week. So I completely get it. And I've never heard my children talk about math before in the back of the car when we're going somewhere, and they do now. And I find that very interesting. And I also really want to drive home the point that I feel very strongly about. Our staff is professional. And just because somebody else in a different district or somebody else has a professor of whatever from whatever college does not make him more professional than our teachers here in Fairfield. You're just as professional as somebody else who didn't like the carpet question. So thank you.
And Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Kennelly, Mrs. Iacono said. I just wanted to thank again the staff, the teachers, everyone who has been so helpful in giving me guidance and information and sharing their thoughts. I've done a lot of work on this. I've read a lot, spoken to lots of people on both sides of the fence, and I do support this. I do think that I don't think anyone at this table who is supporting this is going to say, okay, we're done and that's it. I think we will stay on top of it, that we are not going to just assume that magically a textbook will drop out of the sky for us, that we will follow up on that as well. And but again, we have to trust our professionals, the teachers and administrators who have put a tremendous amount of time in this program, and so I will support this.
Thank you. If we are ready to vote, as chairperson, my job generally is to facilitate the discussion of the board members. That does not mean I don't have my own opinion. but I will say that I'm not going to repeat the comments that were made by my colleagues who are in support of the curriculum, because I also will be supporting it. Not just because our teaching staff is so fully committed to it. I actually think they've made the right decision for this district at this time. Just period. I think they've made the right decision. We've all done our own research and also read the research that's been provided to us from a variety of groups. And just because one other district looks at something and draws a different conclusion doesn't mean their conclusion is any more right than ours. And I think our staff have actually, together with the central office and Dr. Title, have come to the correct conclusion. If there are no final comments, are we ready to vote? The motion on the table is that the Board of Education approve the elementary math curriculum, grades PK to 2. Can I ask you to raise your hands, all in favor? I have Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Iacona, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Kerry. Those opposed? Mr. Liu, Mrs. Brand. The motion passes 7-2. Thank you very much to the public, to the teachers, and to the board members. We are on to approval of Policy 5514, Students' Administration of Medication in the Schools. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve Policy 5514, Students' Administration of Medication in the Schools. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Kennelly and Mrs. Gerber.
Apparently this is not a hot topic.
See, and I thought they all came here for your presentation.
I suggest you open it for public comment right now when we move.
Quick, someone.
Yeah, right. Maybe I'll give you 60 seconds till we get most of the people out the door. And while you're doing it, I'll take a brief moment so that I don't have to do it at the end of the meeting while they're moving. As you know, we have 2 or 3 issues that may have to come before us in executive session. They're up in the air at the moment, and so I would ask you to hold April 30th, Tuesday, April 30th. That's the deadline for one of the issues, as you're aware. So if I choose that one, then at least we can cover it. We're not sure which issues will be ready for us to hear or not, but at least if we hold the date, we'll make the deadline. So it'll be an evening meeting on April 30th. The second comment I'd make is that we are finished with the presentations of the budget at the RTM. The presentation went well, the questions went well, but that does not mean that this board and members of the public who are in support of the public education budget should not continue to reach out in support of the 10,300 children who are depending on this school district for their future. So, having said those 2 things, let's go back to the agenda item, and Mrs. Kennelly. Did I put this on and get the motion? Yes, I did. Okay. So, please present.
We had it as a discussion item at our last meeting. At that point, there weren't really any questions. I don't know how much people had a chance to look over it and reflect on it, but I don't feel the need to re-present it. Does anyone have any questions about it?
Any open questions? Are we ready to vote? I know it. So therefore, we do take public comment on items that we are voting on. So is there anybody here who stayed through the whole evening to comment on the administration of medication in the schools? No, there is not. Back to the board. Are we ready for a vote? The minutes will reflect that Mr. Convito stepped out for this vote. And all in favor, raise your hand, please. We are unanimous with the exception of Mr. Convertito. Right. Moving on to new business, establish the date and time of Fairfield Ludlow High School and Ward High School graduation. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education establish June 27th, 2013 at 6 p.m. as the date and time of graduation for Fairfield Ludlow High School and Fairfield Ward High School. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Iacona. Do we have a discussion or a presentation that somebody is going to
Mr.
make?
Coyne and Mr. Hatza should probably come forward if there's any questions. It's an unusual year, and board members may have questions about the date and time, and so I guess if people are going to have questions for the headmaster, should they come up? If you don't have questions for the headmasters, I won't have them come up.
Mr. Kerry has one question.
Okay.
For the board members who are here for the once-in-a-lifetime occasion where a member of this board, a student member, asked his date to the prom, you should know that Greg, the gentleman, had the courtesy to go to the headmaster and have the headmaster call the chair of the board to make sure that this seemed to be okay. But I kept it a secret from everybody, including the superintendent, so that the wow factor would be there. Mr. Kerry, you have a question.
Wow, it's tough to top that. So we've received a variety of messages. Please make the graduation earlier. Can you just help clarify how you've gotten to this date? And I understand everything but locusts has hit us this year, so that's why we're at this date. And I also understand that we've decided when school's going to end, so I got that part. Is it impractical to move the graduation up earlier, or how would you respond to those pleasing requests?
And they've gotten some requests about
We'll
that, so.
drop it out on the floor and get it
Right.
over with. And
Right.
We have a memo that indicated some of the issues, but you might want to expand on that.
Well, for the record, since Greg arranged the prom date, I think it's only appropriate that he take the first question.
By the way, I hear it's going to be a bad year for cicadas, even though the locusts aren't coming. But yeah, to be honest with you, the way that we schedule exams now, in a normal year, let's say, so if you can picture June's calendar, the 27th is a Thursday. So our underclassmen exams would run on that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We need Thursday as a makeup day, and the Friday before. So that would be June 21st. What we do for the seniors is we take the last day of exams, and we basically, and there's 2 exams per day, and we put them on the front end of that underclassmen schedule, but we only schedule 1 per day. So the senior exams actually precede the underclass exams by 2 days. And the reason we do that is because, all the other classes are in session, and while the seniors are taking exams, it's a 2-hour block of time. And so a lot of those teachers who teach, who have those senior classes, most of them will teach other classes with underclassmen in it. So they can't just sit, in abeyance for 2 hours while, their classes might be meeting without creating coverage issues and whatnot. And, and the students want to review for their exams, so they don't want their teacher to be absent. So to move the senior exams so far ahead of the underclassmen exams, ostensibly a week before, we would have to create a whole different schedule for seniors. And basically we would try to replicate, another round of exams, 2 exams per day. So senior exams would, if we were to have graduation a week earlier, June 20th, our underclassmen exams would remain the same. The senior exams would start as early as June 13th. And we'd run 2 per day for the 13th, 14th, 17th, and 18th. But again, because the teachers of those classes are teaching other classes with underclassmen in them, and we don't want them to miss those classes, we would have lots of scenarios where seniors would not be with their teachers during the exams. We would have a shortage of proctors to administer those exams. So we'd be scrambling to do that. We'd have to find a separate location for the seniors to take the exams because they couldn't sit for 2 hours in a room when another class is scheduled to come in there halfway through. So for practicality purposes, yeah, it does create a whole lot of reorganizing and that type of thing. Is it impossible? No, but but that's June tends to be a pretty hectic month. It's also very hot. People are pretty irritable and all of that. So kids are anxious, with exams coming up and getting out. So so with all that in the mix, Mr. Quinn and I both feel that keeping our regular schedule that it's kind of tried and true would be our best option.
Thank you. That was helpful clarifying.
Okay. Other questions from the board, Mrs. Brand and Mrs. Connelly?
Well,
actually, Mrs. Kennelly was
She
first,
did,
so if you
okay.
want to go ahead.
My peripheral vision isn't as good as it used to be. Mrs. Kennelly and then Mrs. Brand.
Just to clarify, who was it that made the motion? Mrs. Gerber? Because I'm have a bit to say, and I'm hoping at the end of that to propose a friendly amendment that the date of graduation be changed to June 20th. But I'll wait until I make my case before I propose the friendly amendment because it involves convincing you. Obviously, once again, it's the public that brought the issue up, but this is something that has been on my mind since November, and I'd like to read from the minutes which Mr. Convertito very kindly shared with me. When asking about possibly changing the 2012-2013 student calendar, Mrs. Kennelly asked from the high school perspective if an additional day were added to the school year. That's when I was trying to not add 5 days at that point. What would that day be with regard to instruction? Mr. Hatzitz responded that the day would be an exam makeup day. Key sentence, Dr. Title said that the current date of June 20th graduation could remain, even with the addition of 5 days added to June. I think sticking with that June 20th date is very important, and I'd like to go through the administrator's memo, which does raise very good points. But point number one, this allows us to maximize instructional time for all classes. I would beg to differ that if that were really the emphasis for this board, we would have had school in April. Those class days would have made a difference for the AP exams, which seniors are taking. Instead, we opted to give that April break off and add days in June. So the emphasis there was not on instructional time, and as someone who teaches seniors, I assure you that that last week of June for quality instructional time, if you think it's tough in the elementary schools and we talk about them watching movies, you try teaching seniors at the end of June. We work very hard to make it interesting, valid, and a good use of their time, but those days aren't it. April, if that were important, April is when we would have done that, and we opted not to do that. Having graduation at an earlier date would have a negative impact on the senior exam schedule. One, Dr. Title has already verified in these minutes that would be able to manage, and I say with complete respect, anyone who could manage with the Ludlow roof going off and all the reconfiguring you had to do in that building, I have complete faith in your creativity to handle this with your staff, because that was awe-inspiring, that classes were able to continue with the chaos in that building. I also point out that the vast majority of Ludlow seniors are out on internship. They're already done anyway. They're not coming back in June for exams. They're done. That there are a number of classes in which seniors and juniors are enrolled. Graduating seniors would affect these classes too. Again, not at that point in June, not significantly, and I say that as somebody who's doing it. Holding graduation on that day has been our practice for many years. I respect prior practice, but this year has been anything but a typical year. And I think this is something which many members of the public have asked for with very, very valid reasons. I looked up, for example, one college we would love to have our students get into, Providence College. Their orientation for freshmen is that week of June 24th. So a freshman accepted, and that's just one example that I found in a 5-minute Google search. That was one college where a freshman accepted there from the Fairfield School District would not be able to attend that. Or do they opt out of those final days for seniors? And I'm not in favor of that. We've heard about mission trips. We have heard about other jobs. We've heard about countless examples. And again, I come back to, we were told in November that we could hold with that June 20th graduation date. And that is the date that I propose that we support for the town, for the district, and it is with that in mind that I propose the friendly amendment to Mrs. Gerber that we change the motion to reflect the date June 20th, 2013.
On a technical basis, actually, once the motion is made, the motion belongs to the board, not to the maker and the seconder, but we out of custom, if the maker and the seconder accepts a friendly amendment, the board kind of goes along with it. Mrs. Gerber?
Well, I guess I have a question, because I'd like to also hear about if there are different issues at Ward, you know, or if it's pretty much the same situation at Ludlow as it would be at Ward in terms of the difficulty, you know, or are there different issues at Ward that aren't at Ludlow, just to kind of get a sense, you know, of your take on it, I guess, Mr. Coyne.
No, the issues that are reflected in the in the memo that Greg and I prepared are the same for each school. The only difference would be in the number of seniors affected. We have a handful of kids who do internships, not a large number of them. So we do consider that instructional time to be pretty important for those kids. And we would have to adjust the examination schedule significantly for the senior class, which would be a loss of about 2 weeks from our recommended date.
Mrs. Gerber.
I guess, you know, I'm very torn about this because I was one of the 6 board members that did vote to have the days added on in June instead of taking away from April break. And I do recall the comment about the graduation being mentioned, and that wasn't the only reason why I chose to vote, but it did play a part in why I went ahead with adding the days in June. I mean, on the one hand, I don't want to put the staff and the teachers and students who are not seniors to put them in any kind of a negative position. But if it's not impossible, I think, again, this is a unique year. This is not a typical school year that we have had with all of the weather issues, with the roof, with everything. And while I did want to just clarify, because I know someone did say, oh, well, why did you wait till April to set the graduation date? That's what the board always does. We can't set the graduation date until April, so it's not as if we're doing it this year because this year was so unique. That's the way it is. But I am really torn because I wonder if perhaps we could try to make the best of a bad situation and try to figure out a way to make it work. Mrs. Kennelly brought up a good point with making it work with the roof coming off. Could we perhaps do that if, in fact, it is such a huge problem for so many students? And I think the whole freshman orientation is a very important issue. I don't...
Yeah, I think the staff have clearly said while we can move mountains and earth and all the rest, that is, they don't think that's in the best interest of the students, but I think Dr. Title has a comment, and eventually I need to ask you if you're going to accept the friendly amendment or not.
Does the seconder have to agree, or?
Well, the seconder has to, but as I said, the motion belongs to the board, so the board has to agree to say, yeah, we'll go along with the friendly amendment. Generally, this board, if the person who made it and the seconder both say, sure, we can go along, we just kind of agree. So, Dr. Thomas.
I just want to make a couple quick points. And I also know that both headmasters have had conversations with families who have said, you know, we need to know, and we're making plans, and some people have made plans to come back, and kids are off at camp, and they're going to come back, and there's other people, you know, so there's been a lot of conversation and accommodations that have been made. I think the key point, and I think you reflected it accurately when you read the minutes, was that you could hold it on June 20th. It didn't mean that you had to do it. It's legal to hold it on June 20th because there's a provision in the statute that says the board can set a graduation date as long as under the original calendar 185 days would have passed, and this qualifies. So that's why it said could. So it's allowable, in my view. The other point, the reason April 1st is in there is not simply a past practice, but there's another provision in the statute that if the board sets the graduation date after April 1st, no matter what happens, locusts or whatever, from here on out, you can stick to that date. So whatever date you pick, I mean, we've had snow in April, so probably not happening this week. But that's why we do it in April. It's not just customary. It actually is a logical way because the statute has that provision. So I just wanted to make those points. And I don't know if there's been discussions about, you know, families, if you move it back to the 20th, if that messes people up. I'm sure we're going to hear from people who say, you know, my kids are away, but I'll get them back if that's what matters. Can you summarize any of those discussions about, you know, any of the accommodations or inconveniences? I just think that's sort of a piece.
Actually, annually we have the problem with freshman orientation at universities. They are often scheduled, you know, during June. So we sometimes have kids who you know, miss the mandatory rehearsals because they're at orientation and come back for graduation. I mean, that's an annual event. So, you know, what I would anticipate is no matter what date is chosen, it's going to inconvenience someone. Part of what we were hypothesizing was that since most people are aware that, you know, our practice is to hold graduation on the last day of school, that they've anticipated that. But it's, you know, I'd never be able to hazard a guess as to how many more people will be inconvenienced by having it on the 20th versus on the 27th or vice versa. We know it is an unusual year, and you know, either way, obviously we'll make it work. But you know, the one that we think is least disruptive and more educationally sound is what we're recommending.
Mrs. Connelly, I think Mrs. Iacona asked if both the seconder and the maker, and I think she did that for a reason, because she is not, I think, prepared to accept the friendly amendment. So I think if you want to do it, you'd have to do it through a formal amendment. Is that a fair statement?
It is, but I just wanted to state why, and I appreciate you walking through all the steps. I think you did a great job outlining all the reasons that it absolutely could be done. I think we should stick with the June 27th date. I think that's the mindset. I think that, yes, it's been completely unusual, but there's been too much flip-flopping around and too much confusion, and a lot of people now know about the 27th date and they'll work around it. For me, when I voted on this, I wanted the students to have an April break. That's why I chose to go into June. It was too far for me personally thinking to watch the kids go from January to June without a break, and that's why I wanted the April break. I wasn't so concerned about the graduation date, and I will tell you all from personal experience, and this is completely true, you can find people that I graduated with. Way back in 1991 from Massac High School, on the day of graduation, I graduated in the morning. We drove home from graduation, and the 2 cars were completely packed to the gills, and I left for Penn State because I started summer session the very next day. And people were yelling and cheering, "Strapay, you're out of here," walking down the graduation aisle, and everybody knew I was gone. So it happens, and people are going to have to leave for orientation. I did it. I missed all the parties. I missed all the graduation, but I didn't really care because I was in college. So I think the point is people work around it.
Okay. I need a motion to extend the board meeting to, I'm going to say, 11:20.
So moved.
So moved, seconded. All in favor, raise your hand. It's approved. We have a meeting to last till 11:20. Comments on the graduation date?
Yeah. My question for clarification, please. If the students have graduation on the 20th, are you including the number of days that they have to stay till the 26th? Is it required? My point is, I just want to understand, we obviously ran into some contractual issues with this. We had a misunderstanding. We had a statement in one time a year. Now we're trying to regroup it and compromise. I want to know how many days our students have to fulfill. And if our students were to graduate, it isn't actually a graduation. It would be a ceremony. And the graduation really would be only dependent upon the completion of several other days, correct?
So the state law on that is that if, under these exceptions that I outlined, that the board sets a graduation date prior to the 180th day, the statute requires 180, okay, then the students, the seniors, are supposed to make those days up, okay? So you'd have to invite them back, and if any of them actually showed up, you'd have to do something with them. I can't imagine they're actually going to appear. So it's a technical point, but they would have to be complete 180 days of school to have that count as a full year. So in this case, you know, you'd be running out 3 additional days after graduation, because we have 182, right? So 182 is June 27th. So technically, seniors would be asked to come to school on Friday after graduation, the next Monday, and the next Tuesday. That would comply with the law.
Regardless of whether they're absent or not.
Right.
Yeah. Did that answer your question, Mrs. Brandt? Mr. Liu?
So I think that our students really deserve to get their graduation ceremony. I think they've been working towards this for 12 years, 13 years. Yes, we had an unusual year, but we also took the unusual route of reversing what our decision was a whole year earlier and allowing not to take the vacation days off in April, which we had told our constituents and our students and parents a whole year ahead of time. I think, you know, these things do happen though sometimes, but to deprive our kids, even if it's a little inconvenient for us, of this very special day, it's kind of different, to the chair, to Ms. Iacono, it's kind of different from going right after graduation to your next, to your university. We're talking about some kids will have to miss their graduation. And I think that's a really big deal, and I think we owe them that. So I can't approve this.
That's a statement. I'm not sure that it's a question. Do you have any comment that you want to make? Can we go to the public so that, because we can finish the discussion, but in case there's members of the public here that wish to comment.
I also think the important thing is we need a decision tonight.
Yeah.
People
So
are on
state-
pins and needles to make plans, so
Please.
whichever way you vote, please do so by 11:20. Thank you.
Yes, please, state your name and address.
Deanne
please.
O'Shaughnessy, Queens Grant Road. I have 3 kids who have graduated, and I thought the last day of school is the 27th, and normally graduation is the night before the last day of school. And some of my friends who have seniors think it's going to be the 26th. So I just want you to...
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public that wish to speak to this issue? Please state your name and address, please.
Yeah, hi, Jeannie Pasowitz, 355 Sigwin Drive. I've had 2 children that graduated from Ludlow, and there are at some universities and colleges, there are a few orientation days. So some students may miss, it may be a conflict, but I do feel that since this year has been a tough year, why put more stress on our high schools and the staff over at Ludlow and at Ward? So I think keep graduation at the 27th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address, please.
Sophia Lascano, 1371 Brookline Avenue, Fairfield. I just wanted to say I have a sister that's in high school. I'm friends with her friends. She goes to Ward. I have cousins that go to Ludlow, and they're not all seniors, but most of them thought that they will be graduating on the 20th or the 21st or the 22nd and so on. A lot of the kids are nervous to go to college, and they need that, transition time. Okay, I'm done with this. I need to pack. I have to go to a whole different state. I have to adjust. I have to do all these things. Like, even for adults, you don't take, all right, I'm moving today. Tomorrow I start a new life. You take a little bit more time. So personally for me and other students that I've spoken with and that have signed petitions and things of that sort, they not only have family that had planned to come on the 20th, but they are also preparing mentally and emotionally on that. And I'm sorry, Mrs. Iacono, I don't know you, but you can't just pick up and go. Not everyone's the same, I agree with the professor down there. I don't know her name, I'm sorry. I don't know.
She could pick up and go too.
Yeah, also, like I said, a lot of the students are also planning to go, visit other places in the world that'll help them later on in life, that like church trips, other school trips, just normal trips out there that are going to interfere with a life experience that they may not be able to get once they're in college or graduated from college. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Havey, I think you're the last speaker.
Hi, my name is Lisa Havey. I live at 216 Longview Avenue, but I'm sure you all have memorized that by now. I'm speaking as the mother of a junior currently right now, and I think if you were to hold senior exams around the 20th so they could graduate on the 20th, it would be wholly disruptive to the already challenged brains of June teaching, and I think it would be very disruptive. So I think the 26th, 27th would be a much more universal everybody on one program, everybody moving along. That's my thing. Thank you.
Okay, the motion before us is as presented, and are we ready to vote?
Mr. Dwyer, could I add something, if that's okay?
Please do.
The internship experience at Ludlow was mentioned in some of the prior comments. I just wanted to share kind of as a fact that we would not start the Ludlow internship, for the students at Ludlow who happen to be going on internship any earlier than our set start date, because we need a certain amount of instruction for for those students, so we wouldn't be able to start that any earlier. So moving the graduation date would, I guess in effect, shorten the internship experience for many of those students. Right now they go to that experience for about 20 days. This would shorten it to 14 days, and I have no idea how that might impact things. I just bring it up as a state of fact. It may be that some of the vendors that we use and the businesses may feel that that it may not be worth their time to invest for that short amount of time with a student. They may be fine with it. So that's just a point of
I
fact.
thought you were going to explain why you have many more interns at Ludlow than Ward does, as a shameless plug to the chair's wife who helped start that program. But I only say that so that if she watches this show, she'll at least know that she was recognized. Are we ready to move forward? Go ahead.
I do want to make a formal amendment, to request an amendment. Again, yes, Mr. Fadby, I need the Roberts Rules, tutorial that you're busy organizing to get the wording right.
Well, actually, you're just changing, the motion is there, you're just changing the date, correct?
Correct. Okay, then I would like to follow up with one more comment.
Can you make the motion so we can get it on the table?
So I'd like to make a motion to amend. Thank you, coaches, even if I am a professor. And it's, because there are a couple specific points I want to respond to. I'm the only teacher here.
Mrs. Cannelli.
Okay.
Can you?
I did make the motion, and I just kept.
Let me, Mrs. Cannelli, can I just ask you to say I want to amend the date to whatever date you want to put
I would
in?
like to amend the date to have the graduation on June 20th, 2013.
20th. Do we have a second for that? Do we have a second? Mr. Liu has a second. Thank you. Now go ahead.
Thank you. I am the only teacher who's spoken here. I mean, begging the pardon of the administrators here. I'm going to have to do exactly what we're going to be asking Fairfield teachers to do. In Greenwich, I have seniors who are leaving at different points. Some of them have a senior internship, others have a senior project, others are staying at some point into June. I am making 3 different tests. I've done this. And I also know for a fact that there are already seniors who, due to commitments that they have already made, are already submitting their paperwork to have these be excused absences with, housemaster excused, to arrange for earlier exams. It's already happening. Teachers are already doing it. And I would also, just for the sake of the board, know this, I talked to 3 of our high school teachers before I ever came out with this. Because, now granted, 3 is hardly a respectable sample size. But the 3 were very matter of fact of, yes, we can make this happen. We're already having to do it because our students are leaving early. And I'm in the process of preparing seniors already. It's going to happen, and teachers do it. And so no, it's not disruptive in the way that was just spoken of at the podium. That's one point. Secondly,
Connelly,
in terms of what's in the best interest of the kids.
If I can interrupt for 1 minute, we do
Sure.
have to get out of here at 11:20, and we can't extend another time, so please make your point, but I'm just reminding the board that we do have to.
My point is that some of what's been heard here, I have direct experience that it is entirely possible, easy to do, and I would request your support of this amendment.
Okay. Mr. Liu, you seconded it. Do you wish to make a comment, or has Mrs.
I just
Cannelly
want you to
covered it?
think. I just want you to think of the kids who are going to miss their graduation, and I've seen that petition that's going around. If there's even half that many people who are going to have to miss it, it's a one thing again to be really close and not have the date's close and you have to like scoot out of there, but to miss this graduation, this memory, for all the work you've put into it. And it was us who changed the dates. I think it's very unfair not to give them their graduation.
Thank you. The amendment that is on the floor at the moment is to change the date that is shown in the main motion from the 27th to the 20th. All in favor of changing it to the 20th, raise your hand. One, we have Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, and Mrs. Brand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Iacona, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Kerry. So the motion as amended now reads that the Board of Education establish June 20th, 2013 at 6 p.m. as the date and time of graduation for Fairfield Ludlow High School and Fairfield Ward High School. I did skip a step by not asking the public for comment on the amendment of the motion, but I assume that they would be the same. Are we prepared to vote on the main motion? So all in favor of the main motion as amended to show the 20th is the date rather than 27th, raise your hand. Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Brand, all opposed. The same 4, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Iacona, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Kerry. The motion carries 5-4. Our next issue is enclosure number 6. We only have a couple of minutes to go over this. We
Mr.
put
Chair,
it
I'd like
on-
to make a motion to table this item to our next regular meeting.
Well, can I perhaps
second it.
get you out of this in like a minute
Yeah.
Sure.
and not have to even put it on the next agenda?
Well,
No.
how about that? But go ahead.
No?
Um,
All right.
Tell us,
the-
please.
The only
go
reason
for it.
that I had put it on this agenda, and I'll take your motion, but just if I can make one comment. The only reason I put it on this agenda is that as the administration goes to update this plan, they will be doing it based on the existing plan. And things change, and if the board wants to look at the principles behind the planning or other issues and give guidance to the administration on how they should perhaps look at it a little bit different or keep it the same, it would be good to get that information out as soon as possible. Now, you want to make a motion?
My question is this, is it, will, based on what you're saying and Dr. Title's advice, and it does not make sense for us to look at this at this time, or?
No, yeah. I mean, my advice on this is to not have the board take action on this and to let us do another enrollment update, get the Woodard and Curran study out, which will probably come out in a few days, and let the police finish their security scan of the district. And then when we get all that information, we bring this back to you in the fall with a more complete document. That's all I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, perhaps there is a custom of it's looked at one meeting and voted the next meeting. We were not planning to do it in that succession.
This was
We were
gonna be
expecting
longer.
this was going to be a longer process,
Right.
and this was just going to be the beginning of it.
Right.
But time really does not allow.
We don't need a
It's all
table.
right. I think the next meeting is too soon.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is just informational at this point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if board members individually do have
Right.
comments that you wish to.
I'll happily withdraw the motion.
That's all I
Thank you.
wanted to do, so you know we hadn't forgotten it. It's on our list of goals for the year, and I didn't want people to think we had dropped the ball completely.
Okay, so we've covered the subject. Any other final comments on this? Because we actually do have 6 minutes. Any other final comments on this? If not, public, and if not, do we have comments from the general public on matters that did not come before the board tonight? Our scorekeeper has left, right? Huh?
Oh, my God.
One by,
Wow.
that doesn't necessarily have to hit the minutes. Back to the board for open board comment.
It just was a nice
Brand.
thing. I understand that Mr. Glenn Macno won Principal of the Year award, so I was just saying my congratulations.
Thank you. Any other open board comments? Mrs.
Just
Kennelly?
one very brief comment, and I will hopefully proceed with bringing this to the attention of the other town bodies, possibly for recognition. But this past Saturday was the Odyssey of the Mind competition up in Bristol, Connecticut, which I had the privilege of attending and rooting for 6 different teams. And we did, in fact, have a Stratfield team who was going on to Worlds based on their performance. And so on the realm of academics, it was very exciting, and so very proud of them.
Yeah, if there are no other, the only other comment I'd make is remind you that we did split the Math K2 and the Math 610 to two different board meetings for obviously good reasons. And so the next meeting, we will have the presentation, which would be round 3 of the math, if you count last spring as the first round, et cetera. So that'll be for the next regular meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes. Huh?